Hello and welcome to the combined Tom story. So, if you've been watching the parts or if you're just catching up, this is here to make it as easy as it can be to watch all three parts of his story of bringing us up to date with where he's at so far. And just so you know, as we go along, and we do tell everybody's story in typically multiple installments, as we wrap up their story, there will be kind of a big one, a big mamma jamma to kind of close us off on somebody's episode so that if you haven't caught up yet, it's nice and easy for you to do that. So that's number one. Number two, thank you so much for all the support that you're giving on the podcast itself and especially on Tom's story. Things like shopping on his bonfire fundraiser, where you can buy the merchandise. For example, I have on my Phoenix Rising from the Mulholland's Ashes sweatshirt. Been wearing it like nonstop for 4 days now. Highly recommend. Also got it in a bigger size because like who doesn't want to swim around inside a big sweatshirt? One of my favorite things. Hello, fall. So you can buy the merchandise. You can also just make a donation, or you can do both. Another way that if you're light on cash, dude, no worries, because no impact is too small. You remember this, right? So you can also watch the documentary that got made about his experience. The link for that is down below. You can also share that documentary. You can leave a like on that video, leave a comment on that video. Use your energy and your voice to vote for their success, right? To vote with your time even and your energy for Mulhollands to come rising from the ashes to regain access to healthy food in Malvern, Iowa. Like that's really the star of the show on these first three episodes. So I would love to hear down below in the comments what you've thought so far of the podcast. Would love for you to share your thoughts. Do tune back in. We'll be meeting our new guest starting with the next week's episode, Marcy Penner. So her episodes will come out. We'll meet another new guest and another new guest. And you guys, the pipeline is so full. At this point, I mean, I'm only 3 weeks into releasing these episodes, and I think I have like 9 that are recorded and ready to go, and then probably another 5 or 6 that are in the pipeline, like on the schedule to record. So, I mean, like, we are off and running, and it is so fun to get to personally get to see the arc unfold. And even if you've only watched these first 3 episodes or you're about to, I think you're going to get a really good glimpse into what is my grocery adventure, because it does go quite a bit deeper than groceries. If you're really paying attention, you'll know what I mean. So thank you so much for all the support so far. And without further ado, let's dive into Tom's story. Hello out there, and welcome to the My Grocery Adventure podcast. My name is Carly Wharton, and I'm your host of this show, where this is a podcast for people who want to make an impact. And my particular impact part of it, the big part of it, came through, you probably guessed it, grocery. But there's lots of ways to do that. So this show will encompass all kinds of stories of people who have shown up in ways where they were able to make a real impact in the world. And sometimes maybe that's on a grand scale, but often it's on an ordinary moment to moment kind of scale. So those are really the stories that this podcast will capture, where truly each and every one of us has something inside of us that we can use to show up in the world and make our own impact, no matter what size that is. There is no impact too small. So if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. This is the first episode that we are ever recording. So if you're catching up with us from the very beginning, welcome as you join us on this new part of our My Grocery Adventure journey. I am joined today, our very first guest, as we dive in. He was very willing to kind of fly the plane while we're building it, so he makes total sense as the first guest. Tom Mulholland, and he is a fellow grocery owner and has just a fascinating story. No intro or biography is ever going to do it justice, which is why I'm super excited to get to dive in during this episode and uncover and get to see kind of the process of, not just making a big impact in the bright, shiny thing that maybe we can think that that is, but ultimately the real process, the real journey of it, step by step behind the scenes. This is a space where we're going to get to bring that out into the light, so we have a better understanding of ultimately what it means to make an impact in the world. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Those of you that are watching, if you're listening only, you actually can watch. There's a YouTube channel as well, My Grocery Adventure. Definitely feel free to head on over there. I would love to interact with you in the comments if you're called in that direction. I think that's it. Without further ado, Tom Mulholland, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh gosh, it is my pleasure to be here. I feel like my grocery adventure has been coming to life maybe my whole life, and there were definitely stages where I knew more about what I was doing than even now. I think there's still a lot to come that maybe we don't even fully understand the adventures that we're really on. Um, but today I am super excited to get to hear about your specific journey, and I would love if we could dive right in, kind of all the way back at the beginning. Like, where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was that like?
I live and was born in Malvern, Iowa, which is in the southwest corner. We're about 15 miles from the Missouri River and about 30 miles from the Missouri border. I commuted to Omaha for many years in my working career. As for the grocery business, I started out working Saturdays, working summers at my grandfather's and then my father's store. My great grandfather actually started it in 1875 with a partner as a dry goods store, and eventually groceries took over. My grandfather put a small section in back in the 19 teens, and that eventually took over. When my grandfather retired, the meat cutter that was here said, "I want to be made a partner also. And if you don't, then I'm leaving." And he'd been here. He was an important part of the business. That wasn't something that my father knew much about. So the two of them became partners in 1972 and had it for many years between the two of them. So that's a brief start to my story.
Absolutely.
Um,
How many people are in, did you say Malvern or Melbourne?
at this point, there's just over 1,000 in Malvern. 1,050, I believe, is the actual population. It's been a little bigger at times, and it's going to be bigger in the future. There's a lot of growth going on right now. Our school district is adding on to our high school, turning it into a K through 12 school. We've got a new 50-unit housing subdivision being built that's just started here in our community. And right in front of that, there's an old rest home that had been empty for a while, and the school district has bought that, working with a number of different volunteers and organizations. They're turning it into a large child care center that would take up to like 175 children in it. And that's going to be huge for the community because they'll be bringing people in from all around the community. Something like that also means that instead of our grade school being 7 miles out in the country, now it's going to be here in the community. So we're going to have those after school shoppers coming in that are picking up the kids. We're going to pick up a lot more business that way, the new housing subdivision, et cetera. More people working in the community with the school, with the child care center, those different types of things, and more possible employees with the new housing subdivision. So it's all things that are working in favor of my small town store.
Love that. I love that. Um, what what point did you leave Malvern, and then like kind of what took you away, and then when did you come back and what brought you back?
Okay. Um, I had a hard time getting along with my dad's partner. My dad was a very small man, meek and mild, and didn't want to argue with anybody. His partner had been an all-state football player. He was right because he was bigger and louder in many situations, and that's the way he acted. And I just couldn't deal with that anymore. I had started full time at one point to learn to cut meat, and I enjoyed that. I went to a meat cutting school in Sioux City at Western Iowa Tech. I thought I could learn more, learn a little bit faster. It's nice to get direction from more than one person and learn more than one way to do things. So even though my dad's partner Cork was a very good meat cutter, I thought I could learn more and do it faster by doing that. So I did. I went to work at a small town locker near here, and lived in that community for a little while. The owner there was a very good meat cutter, but not a great businessman. And he told, I was the only one in there that was not family. He told us at one point, he said, I think you boys should find new jobs because the IRS is going to shut me down. So I was ready to move on someplace and didn't really have any exact plans. Lots of construction going on in Texas at that point, and I was thinking about following some of my classmates down there into a field I'd never done before. But right then, my dad said, we really need more help at the store. I'd appreciate it if you'd come back here. So I did. I worked there for a number of years, uh, got married, and was working there, living in Malvern, had our first house in 1988. I just could not get along with my dad's partner anymore. There were issues, and I left. I started working in Omaha, and it was a very small store. It was actually smaller than our small town store, but the reputation that it had was unbelievable. I worked there for a month short of 20 years. I started as a meat cutter, but within a year, I was co-manager of the meat department, and things just continued to improve. The small little store, Walner's Grocery, the reputation, we had all of the doctors and all the lawyers in town shopped there. Warren Buffett lived just a few blocks away. Each state only has two U.S. senators, and both of the Nebraska senators were customers at that point. Um, the TV stations liked working with a smaller store. And so we were well known to all of the reporters. If they had any story that had to do anything with food, they usually came to Walner's. There was one point where I was interviewed in 2 days. I was interviewed by three channels for three different stories. And I was probably interviewed, you know, dozens of times over the years that were live or recorded for later on. The Wall Street Journal wrote a story about it. If you're coming to Omaha for the College World Series, you've got to go try the brats at Walner's for your cookout, for your parking lot adventures. So, we really had a lot of publicity. Uh, I learned how to make sausages, how to smoke bacon, and different things like that. We shipped meat all over the country. Omaha Steaks is well known, but the quality we used was higher. And even though we didn't have a deal worked out with the shipping companies, the price usually came out the same to what they were doing with higher quality, and you could get whatever you wanted. So I learned a lot of things. There was one day that I was working, and I thought to myself, it's 9 a.m. and I've already worked with USDA choice and prime beef, Kobe Wagyu beef. We were the only store in Omaha to carry that at the time. Fresh lamb, veal, pork, chicken, turkey, three types of seafood by 9 a.m. or smoked products that we were doing. I mean, the experiences that I was able to gain working in this store, not many meat cutters in the world could rival those and match those. So I gained so much experience. There was a newspaper article that called me possibly the best meat cutter in Omaha. And for a community the size of Omaha with a reputation for meat, that really meant something. As I said, I worked there for about 20 years. The store back in Malvern at that point, my dad and his partner could no longer get along. So a few years after I left, they split. My dad decided he was close enough. One of them had to buy the other one out. My dad decided he was close enough to retirement age that he would just go ahead and retire instead of trying to take over the whole thing on his own and, digging a hole possibly. So Cork ran it on his own for a few years and he developed cancer and needed to retire. I looked at buying it. I talked to people from the grocery warehouse. I was really interested in putting the family name back on the business. And I just decided that I was too young. I was in my early 30s. I thought I needed to get more experience before I did that. A few years later, that first owner, after Cork, he put it up for sale. And I heard that it was for sale. I went in and somebody said, he's gone now, come back at 1 o'clock. So I did. And I walked in and I talked to him for a moment. He said, I've got a meeting. He said, come back at 2 o'clock and we'll talk. He knew what I was there for. At 2 o'clock, I walked in and there they are shaking hands. He just sold the store to somebody else. And that really hurt. Fast forward another 10 years, my experiences, my reputation, my knowledge had just grown over that time. And those young owners, they decided they wanted to get out. He wanted to run a restaurant. He'd started doing catering, had a hot deli in the store, and he decided he really enjoyed that more than the grocery business. And I was the first one that they called. They knew that I had tried to buy it before. They felt bad that it didn't go back into my family, but they called me and we made a deal. I talked to the grocery warehouse. I said, we're trying to get this done, trying to get all of the paperwork done. Do you think it's possible to do everything in 6 weeks? And he said, yeah. I said, oh, 6 weeks, not months. Oh, wow, that's going to be very tough. But we did it. I was working 50 hours a week at my regular job. I was spending another 40 hours a week probably filling out paperwork for all the different licenses and things that we had to have with the state, with WIC, with food stamps, things like that. So we got everything done. And on Mother's Day of 2008, the store belonged to my wife and myself finally. We kept it closed for a day while we did a major cleanup. Uh, the previous owners had taken a lot of vacations, had a family home down in the Ozarks, and so they left it to the employees to run a lot. And when nobody's watching the employees and giving orders to the employees, then they kind of let things slide, and that's where things were. The first little bit was a learning curve for me, but we passed that previous owner's last year's sales with 100 days to go in our first year. So things were really moving along decently. The problem was this building was 140 years old and the equipment was very old. So there were always lots of repairs, lots of money we were putting back into the business. We put in new lights that first year because only about half of them worked. We were able to find energy grants and things like that. So we got 80 or 90% of that paid for. So it was, a smart decision. And then they paid the rest of themselves off with the energy savings on the new, more efficient lights. We put in new freezers and milk cooler. And again, those things probably paid for themselves very quickly because of how old and how inefficient the previous things were. When they were tearing out the freezers, at one point they had to stop and wait for about 3 hours because there was a hole in one of the freezers and they had a chunk of ice holding it to the wall about that big. So lots of things that we needed to do and that we did do. And I was just working my tail off trying to teach somebody else to do these things and to give up the idea that, yeah, maybe I can do it better, but if they can do it 90% as well and take some of that load off of me, then it would be better off. And I'm learning that now. Um, I went through the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, and that was one of the things that we learned there that, onboarding your employees as you hire them, taking the time to delegate, to teach them how to do some of these things is going to make your business better in the long run. And we'll get to that point, and I do appreciate that. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that was awesome, and I would love to unpack some of what you offered there. Um, One of the first questions, and I had this the time that we sat together last time, was like, when you decided in your early 30s that you don't yet have enough experience, can you talk us through a little bit, like what was specifically the lack of experience, or can you say more about, yeah, like what led you to that conclusion at that time?
just talking to the person from the warehouse at that point and thinking about all of the business aspects of it that I didn't know anything about really had a lot to do with that. Um, a few years later, there was a grocery store in a neighboring town that came up for sale. And I started looking at that, and it was a little bit bigger, a lot busier. And I gave that some consideration. And the first thing they asked was, what about your business plan? I don't know how to do a business plan. So I started doing some research on that. I found that Creighton University had an adult education class on writing a business plan. 13 weeks, if I remember right, 10 or 13 weeks, something like that. I went and did that. I was trying to find ways to further my education, to make myself stronger and get myself to the point where I could do that type of thing. And, that was one of the ways that it worked out. So, um, I had decided at that point that yes, I do believe I am ready, and I was looking for the opportunities now, but they don't always come when you want them to. So I had another friend that ran a grocery store in a neighboring town, and when I wrote my hypothetical business plan, I wrote it up as if I was buying his store. Again, his store had a lot of good points about it. He was having some health issues and thinking about getting out, so it was a good tie-in, a good way to do that. Became close friends with him, and I went and helped him when he was on vacations and did things that I could. So just not only gaining more knowledge, but gaining more contacts and things like that throughout the industry
Yeah.
and throughout the area. I think that's always a good thing. So,
I wonder, do you think that the experience at the locker where the guy was like, go find a different job because I'm getting shut down, like do you think see like being so up close to somebody whose lack of business experience had caused them to lose their business? Like, do you think that was like in your head at all as you're like, I'm not ready? Do you know what I
yeah, I do. I mean, that's something that opens your eyes, definitely.
reality
Just because, and that was one of the reasons. Thinking back to that, that was one of the reasons where I had decided I don't have enough experience because I could see that this person was very good at one aspect of the job, and
Mm,
that is something that I also had good experience in, but not the business side of it. So I think that's what held me back at the first time. And while I really hadn't thought about it that way, then yes, that absolutely was one aspect of my thoughts at that point.
yeah.
But again, I worked at learning more and doing some things. I was, and it wasn't much, but I was the treasurer of our local golf course for a little while. So that gave me a little bit more experience on learning how to do some of the tax forms and things like that needed to be done, the quarterly taxes, etc. So the state came to me at one point just after I'd taken over, and they actually came in the store, and it's about 11:30 in the morning, and two guys in suits come walking in, and they said, "Well, we need to speak to Mr. Mulholland." And I assume they meant my father. So he's at lunch right now. He'll be back in a little while. And they said, "Okay, we'll wait." So they just stand around. And finally, my dad's partner spoke up, said, "Well, I'm Mr. Mulholland's partner. What can I help you with?" And they said, "Well, no, we're actually here about the golf course." And, oh, they said, "That's me." Well, the previous secretary treasurer had not done the tax forms for about 2 years. We didn't know anything, but there was a $10 fine for not doing all of that. So they sent two guys in suits from Des Moines, 2 hours away, to come in and make sure that these were all taken care of. And that was also a learning experience for me. So you've got to get that paperwork done.
Right? Again, I feel like you have kind of several experiences, it sounds like, where seeing the
Yeah.
consequences of not having the experience that you need and like that hesitation of, I'm not ready yet. Like, I mean, it makes sense based on what you lived, and like
Right.
that makes sense that you would have felt that way.
Well, and then there's also things that I did wrong when I did buy the business. I don't know enough about this. I don't know enough about that. There were times where we'd have a breakdown. The refrigeration isn't working, and I call my refrigeration guy. He's in a town about 20 miles away. And, he'd get over here as fast as he could. And, oh, you've just got a fuse that blew. Well, I didn't know what I was doing and didn't know where to check. And some of those small, stupid things like that, I did learn. And, that's the type of experience that I could have used earlier.
Mm.
It would have saved me money. The first year or so, my grocery warehouse would have food shows, usually in Minneapolis at that point, and have them twice a year. Well, I didn't make it because I was too busy learning and trying to run things those first couple of times. But there were special deals and things like that where I could save money. When I did start going, unfortunately now I'm in a small town, but I'm thinking, I'm a big shot. I'm buying stuff now, and I can make deals with these people. Go and there's deals on ice cream. Well, I'm always gonna sell ice cream, and I overbought.
Mm.
Even things like that, it got some of it got outdated. So, I had to learn to think a little bit more carefully about that. I learned that it isn't worthwhile for my business, for as small as I am, to buy 2 cases of green beans, to come in 3 months from now because I can save a quarter a case. Well, that savings is not enough for me to guess whether I'm actually going to need those or not at that point. Some of the different things like that, I had to start looking at, are these savings actually worthwhile to tie up my money? Do I have the space? Do I have the money to be buying so many things to be coming in right before Mother's Day, Memorial Day, something like that? Uh, uh, a pallet of paper towels and a pallet of water, both in the same week. And my employees really have to struggle to get those things out of the way so that we can have room for their next deliveries.
Mm.
It's experiences like that go through. You don't learn until you've made some of the mistakes, and it wasn't just my money; it was also my space, my lack of ability to get some other products in later on, possibly. So there's things like that I wish somebody had taken me under their wing a little bit more and shown me some of those things. But you learn the hard way. And I've tried to be transparent with other business owners that I work with, talk with, and why should you make the same mistakes I did if I can show you? Sometimes, yeah, that's the only way you are going to learn. But I try to help as I can and pay it forward. I'm in a Facebook group called the Leaders Network. And this is a group of business owners, business managers from across the country that Facebook puts together. It's basically by invitation only. You have to answer questions, go through a vetting process. When I got into it, there were about 600 people in it. Now there's about 2,000. But you can go in there and you can ask questions, and these people don't feel like they're your competition. They're there to help you. And if there's any way that I can share some of my experiences, some of my wisdom, I didn't get this gray hair, without spending a lot of time in something. And I try to share as I can and make it worthwhile for somebody. Someone asked some questions the other day. They were thinking about some different ways of handling their business. And they commented about, well, I built this baby, and I told them, I said, you did this, you built your business out of passion, out of love. And now I think it's worth giving it a little bit of time and doing what you have to. And they appreciated my thoughts and the way that I made them look at it. There's a lot more to it than that, but there's different ways that businesses can help each other. I've been asked to speak at numerous conferences, and I spoke at a state economic development conference called the Iowa Star Conference years ago. And one of the things I try to get people to understand, especially in a small town, is that the businesses should work together, should do what they can together. Don't think about that business next door. I'm in a grocery store. I shouldn't think about that coffee shop next door, that art gallery next door. That's my competition, but I should work with them. When I advertise on the radio, one of the things that I do is I talk about the town festivals or events that are going on. I might talk about some of the other businesses and what they're doing. Because if I can give those people that are listening three or four reasons to come to my community, I've got a lot better chance of getting them in my store instead of just saying, hey, come see me.
Yeah.
I did have a lot of customers that came from 30, 40, 60. I had people that came from 150 miles away to pick up some of the sausages that I made, the bacon, the things like that. And, it improved my whole community because they're going for lunch at the restaurant while they're there. I had people that would come to town. They're going to go to the doctor next door. They're going to stop and get groceries. I got to go pick up medicine at the pharmacy. We're in town. Let's go down and have lunch while we're here. If the businesses will work together and promote each other, make the town much stronger, it's important and it's going to help a lot. And it helps everybody. You think about the taxes that are being paid, that helps improve your roads, your fire department, different things like that. It helps in so many ways. And if you think about it that way and try to do what you can, it can make a big impact.
Yeah, a rising tide raises all ships. I mean, that's what's good for me is good for my neighbors and vice versa. We're all in this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. But
Tom.
so many people don't think about things that way. And
Mm,
I gotta get those customers that are going in next door. Yeah, but if you work together and bring more customers for both of you, that's even better.
yeah, yeah. It's like a scarcity mindset or like an abundance mindset. Like, is there only a limited number of dollars and customers and whatever that we're kind of all scrappily fighting over? Or is this
Yeah,
something where, like we're all gonna add value and we're all gonna receive value in return? And the more we can cooperate with each other, I think another benefit is that it makes it just a nicer like network within the community, to like skip the tension
right,
of being in competition with each other. And if anything, there's
right,
another piece of competition that I think is really fun, which is, it's not all bad. That competition, like if you see somebody who is making you feel like, ooh, they're going to steal my customers or whatever, like what are they doing? And is there something that you want to innovate and switch up inside what you're offering. Because maybe
Exactly.
that fear of like, oh crap, like my customers are going to go over here now. Like, well, I mean, if you're giving them value that they can't live without, they're not going anywhere. And so if you're thinking they're maybe leaving, like maybe there's something else that you can put into your offering or a new product you want to bring in, or, like you were saying, go to the food shows and get a bunch of new stuff coming. So you have something to like draw them back in there. So that signal of feeling like, oh crap, like I'm in competition and like I gotta fight for my piece of the pie. It's like, there's a healthy way to channel that. Like if it is maybe unavoidable, I don't know. I think it could definitely be pretty normal to think, especially on the weeks where, like I remember in our first couple years where, God dang it, like the ends just almost don't meet or they really don't, and then try to cooperate with like the other store down the road. Like I get it.
Right.
It's normal, I think, when you're feeling your piece of the pie is threatened. And so what you're
Yeah.
describing, it's like, you kind of found your groove and you had enough that there was like, let's all kind of pull in together, and there's enough to go around here. And that's easier to see, I think, when you do, when your ends are meeting personally. So it's maybe a spectrum, but I'm right there with you as far as like, you know, cooperating with what's going on, like getting them in town using the festival. You don't have to be the sole reason that they're coming into your town in order to benefit from the fact that
Yes.
they did. Like that's, yeah, exactly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been very lucky in my business life that I've had good mentors. I've had good leaders above me.
Mm.
I talked about the locker owner. He was a very good meat cutter, and I learned some things from him. Mike, my boss in Omaha that I worked for 20 years, he was third generation in his store. It recently, he's retired now, but it recently celebrated its centennial. It's 100 years in business. So that was fantastic. But I learned a lot of things from him. He advertised on the radio, and I learned by watching that. Omaha is a lot different situation than what I'm in a small town. But I'd hear the customers say that, I've heard your radio ad for the last 6 months, and I drive by here all the time. And I just decided I had to come in after hearing that. So I learned that it isn't going to hit. You can't put a radio ad out and boom, that next day everybody's coming in. It takes time. You've got to be consistent with things.
Mm.
But I learned some things from that. My dad, I learned how to treat the customers. As I said, he was kind of meek and mild, but he was very friendly. He was very personable with the customers, and everyone respected him. And I appreciate that. I bought my business in 2008. 4 or 5 years later, we had put a lot of money back into the store, not always because we wanted to, but because we had to. We put the new lights in and that helped. They ended up not costing that much and paid for themselves. The freezers, that was a big chunk of money. But then with the business, with the building, with the equipment being so old, there were always lots of repairs that had to be made, and things were tough. It was getting to the point that my bookkeeper and I would be talking. So I think we let this bill go for another week or two. We've got to get this one paid, and things like that. The employees always got paid. Uh, but I was also cutting back a little bit on employees. Well, I can work a little bit more. I know I'm here at that point. I don't need to have someone there. So things like that. And again, it just added to my hours a little bit more. Again, I got lucky. I saw an email that came out from the Small Business Development Center here in Iowa, from our regional one, and it talked about a business pitch contest. And it said that the deadline for entry has been extended. And I hadn't seen anything about it before. I think I could do this. I think I could do well in this. And it had a $5,000 first prize. What you had to go on Facebook and asking your customers to vote for you each day. And there were over 30 entries in our region in Iowa, and they had 10 different regions, the 10 different small business development centers for the state that were doing this. And the contest was called Dream Big, Grow Here. And the deadline for the votes is coming up. The top five are going to make it, and then they give their pitch for the $5,000. And we were going back and forth in about fifth and sixth place, and we're down to that last day, and we're in and out of that top five, and we made it. We made it in fifth place, with some other places getting a lot more votes. So, I started putting my pitch together, and we went to Iowa Western Community College and presented our pitches one evening, and had a panel of judges, three different business people from around the state. And I won. So I won that $5,000, which helped a lot. We were able to keep going. But then those 10 regional winners were going to go to the state finals about 4 months later. And that was all the way across the state in Cedar Rapids. And this time there would be a $10,000 first prize. I worked on that pitch. I took that pitch, the PowerPoint presentation. I've never done a PowerPoint presentation before. This is my first experience with that. I've never been in a contest like that before. And I worked on it. We have 8 minutes to give our presentation. And, I'd read it. I probably read it 500 times out loud to myself in my office at home, something like that. And if I give a little pause right here, that gives it more dramatic effect. If I change this one word here. And when I got to Cedar Rapids, they've got a lot of things going on. This event is called Entree Fest, and it is for small business owners from all across the state in all different industries. And there's a lot more technical aspects of business on the other side of the state, where University of Northern Iowa is, Iowa State, University of Iowa. So that's why it's on the other side of the state. There isn't that many things that meet that type of standards here. So I drove all that way, and all day long I worked on just tweaking my presentation a tiny bit. And like I said, a different word here, a pause there. I gave my presentation that night. I was the third out of the 10 to do that. And they said, when the music starts playing, you're done. Your 8 minutes are over. I had about a half of a sentence to go, but I stopped. But I really thought that I did a good job in that. And everyone finishes up, the judges leave, and they come back. Kim Reynolds, our lieutenant governor, gets up on the stage, and she mentions, who got third place. And they did a very good job, and I was impressed. And second place, and I didn't get that. And, I think if I remember right, that was $1,500 and $2,500 for the second and third place. And that would have helped my business a lot. And then they announced the winner, and it was me. And, I just dropped my head because I was so shocked. That money meant a lot to the business. But more than that, that allowed us to pay some of the bills that we needed to do some different things. But more than that, the press, the notoriety that we gained, the connections that I made, is the SBDCs that are handling this. And I met so many people from there, so many other people that are interested in economic development and in small communities. I won other awards after that were basically just follow-ups to this. I commented earlier about speaking at the Iowa Star Conference. Well, that was, shortly after this that I was invited to that because they'd heard me here. It turned my business around. and a lot more people heard about the homemade products that we were making, about the smoked bacon that we were making, the Swedish potato sausage. I had people that drove from Ames, which was basically 3 hours away, and they started doing that every year. And they're coming to Malvern for one reason, to get their yearly supply of that. I had people that came from Bellevue, Nebraska, and Bellevue, Iowa. One's on the Missouri River, one's on the Mississippi River, in the same day. When I talk to customers, I would say, I know that you just drove 50 miles. I know that you passed a dozen grocery stores that you could have gone to in that time, but you chose to come to my store. You get to know the customers, you talk to them, you make it personal with them, and you make that connection with your customers, and that means a lot. I commented that I advertised on radio, and what I would do is I would get a certain number of 30-second spots that we gained each month with our payment, but we would stockpile those for times of the year where it was more important. Maybe graduation, uh, things like that. The holidays, especially Christmas, we'd save up so many of those commercials. But then I also had a live 3-minute infomercial that we did each week with the radio host, and they'd call and talk to me. A couple of times I actually went, this is in Shenandoah, about 25 miles away, and I was on live with them each week, and we'd talk about these different things that we're doing. We talked about, I've got a new batch of our bacon that just came out of the smoker, the smoked turkeys that we did uh, for the holidays. At one point, I had every person that we'd ever done a smoked turkey for had gotten at least one more after that because they enjoyed it so much. But being able to bring those customers and getting out on the radio, and I use different forms of advertising in different ways. I had my full page newspaper ad that just about any grocery store is going to have, but we wrote it ourselves, so I could put my homemade products in there instead of just having the 4-page color flyer that the warehouse sends out, and it changes everything up. The previous owner was doing that, and one of the reasons that didn't work is, this week they've got this type of hot dog in ad, and you've got to get a certain number of them in to try to please everybody. Well, you've got leftovers. Well, the next week they've got another type of hot dog in the ad, and okay, now these leftovers aren't going to sell because this one's on sale. Or they had 16-ounce lunch meat on sale this week and a 12-ounce this week. And, it made so much more sense for me to write my own ads. I could base it off of what they had on sale, but I could put in the things that I want. And if I didn't want to be switching up those lunch meats, those hot dogs, all of those different things, I wasn't forced to.
Mm.
I advertised my own specialty things, but I could also look and say, I've got too many of this thing and it's going to be outdated if I don't do something with that soon. Boom, it's in my ad. I just sold 80% of what I was talking about, and I'm not going to be forced to worry about that getting outdated. We did that with the print ad. With our radio ad, we're talking about these specialty products that we make. We're talking about the gourmet steaks that we've got. We're going to hand cut steaks for you. If you want 3 in a package, that's what you're going to get, that type of thing. These people are looking for more high end things. They're coming from further away. They've got more money to spend, and I used that type of thing. There's also free social media and using Facebook to talk about, hey, we just took this out of the smoker. We just made a batch. I small town, but we made a stuffed chicken breast and we sold 60 of them within 2 hours because I put it up on Facebook and everybody's watching that. I had people that came in 2.5 later. Gee, I need some of those. Sorry, they're gone. And learning what is going to work, learning to, try to keep in contact with your customers. I couldn't carry everything, but I'd get the most valuable things. I'd get the most common things, the most popular things, because I talked to the customers and I saw what they wanted. It's a small town store, so I can't carry everything, but we did what worked best for our customers. And, that's what made us stronger and made us, a go-to grocery store for so many people. Our neighboring community, 11 miles away, has 2 grocery stores. but we had a lot of customers that came from that town and came over and shopped with us, and then hit the other businesses also. Those tax dollars helped our community a lot. So you got
Yeah.
to think about that type of thing.
Well, and that's such a beautiful example where the impact that you think you're having, like I'm gonna run a grocery store, like the impact that you think you're having and the impact that you're actually having can be two completely different things. Where like it's really, yes, you running your grocery store, but the ripple effects of what that actually means for your community, for the people who live there, for the other business owners, like you're saying, like it's so much bigger than just what you can personally like see and experience of your own impact. And so, yeah, I love like keeping that in mind that there is all of these other things happening kind of as an offshoot of what you're doing. So I absolutely love that you went there. What year was the pitch contest? When was that?
That was in 2013, uh, and it changed things up.
Yeah.
Kim Reynolds, the lieutenant governor, became governor. She came to my store. Malvern had not had the lieutenant governor or governor in our community since 1972. She came to my store, a few months later. She came to my store three more times over the years, just sometimes because she was close and she wanted to come in and say hello. The people like that, the governor, the lieutenant governor, they try to hit all 99 counties each year. That's what Iowa has, is 99 counties. So, that was part of their pledge to be visible and stuff. Well, it wasn't my community they were coming to normally when they're visiting our county. Now they were there a lot more often. I had the Secretary of Agriculture in my store. I had the state auditor in my store, the lieutenant governor, the governor, so many more executives that we hadn't had in our community or ever in my store. We had a lot of other things that were happening that were improving the community and making a name for it. And, we fed off of that and did a lot. You were talking about the impact, and that contest had a huge impact on my business, on my life, and on my community. But there's been other things in my business that have shown the impact a lot more. I commented earlier when I described where my town is. We're about 15 miles from the Missouri River. My county abuts the Missouri River. 2019, on St. Patrick's Day, the county flooded. It didn't come clear over to my town, but the Missouri River I had a classmate whose parents lost everything in the town called Pacific Junction. 7 miles away from the river, they were under 6 feet of water. The neighboring town that I've commented about, Glenwood, is 5, 6, 7 times bigger than my community. Their water treatment plant was underwater. That community had no way to have, water on tap for people. The day that all of this happened, we had just received a pallet of 24 packs of water, and I took one of my employees. We loaded as much as we could into my pickup, and we went over and gave those to the community, took them into City Hall. Others were doing the same thing. My customers heard, when I put this on Facebook that we're doing a good thing, my customers heard what we were doing. People started bringing me money, said, unfortunately, this flooding and this went on for over 6 months. It was the worst natural disaster to hit my county that we've ever had.
Mm.
Um, they had so many people that lost their homes, that were displaced from their homes, that were living in a shelter over in Glenwood in the old armory. Uh, People were coming in and giving me money, saying, "You can get the things that they need. You do what you can." People would bring in $200 in cash, $500 in cash. They didn't ask for a receipt. They just trusted me. I got $1,000 from a couple of different people, and over many months, we picked up a lot of things. The contest that I won earlier, Delta Dental, was one of the main sponsors of that. And I called them up. I said, my county has real problems. We've got a lot of people that have lost everything. I said, when I won that contest, one of the prizes was you donated a few hundred toothbrushes to the charity that I chose. I said, we need something like that again. They said, we already have. Your county has reached out. I said, thank you, but I wanted to use my voice. I wanted to try. I had a slight connection here, so I wanted to do what I could. I contacted my warehouse. These people are all living here and they're feeding them, hundreds of people a day. I contacted my warehouse, or they started contacting me, said, we've got cases of hot dogs that, the expiration date is only 2 weeks away. So we need to move these fast. Instead of $35 a case, we'll sell them you for 5. Lunch meats that used to be $25 a case, I'm getting for 3. I'm getting for 7, something like that. We took pickup loads of things like that they needed to feed all of these people over to Glenwood. People gave me about $8,000 in contributions, in
How much
donations,
was
and
it?
over the time, about $8,000. But we turned that into about $80,000 worth of product that we took over there. I gained customers from that. That's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to help people. I had the connections. I had the ability to get these things at a better price than what you're going to be able to. It's nice if somebody takes a case of green beans over to them, but if they can give me $5 and I can get that case of green beans so much cheaper than what you had been able to, now I just got 3 cases of green beans for what you would have gotten one for. And that's when I realized the impact that I can have. When I was young, I read a book, and it was just a kid's sports book. But there was a thing in there, and one of the characters commented. He said he's telling about the term noblesse oblige, which is a French term, and it basically meant he who can should. He's talking about why he helped somebody else because he had the ability, because he could. And I've always remembered that. And that's what I was trying to do here. I have the connections. So it isn't anything too hard for me to do this, but I can do it so much easier than somebody else. So I did. And as I said, we gained so many customers. When these people are able to live on their own again or whatever, they remembered the kindness that we showed. They remembered the support and the way that we went out of our way to help. And it helped my business in the long run. The year after that, COVID hit, and there's people out of jobs. There's people that can't work. And again, people started coming in and bringing money to me. I had a gentleman come in at one point, and my only connection with him so far was they had moved to town and they had come in and they had written a bad check. It bounced. But before I even knew about that, they'd written a second check and it bounced. I tried to get the money out of them. I went to the trailer that they were living in, and they didn't have it. There's just nothing that they could do, and forgot about it. I've been very lucky in the time that I've had my store. I only had about, I think, 5 bad checks in all of these years, and that was 2 of them. Now COVID has hit, and this guy comes in to talk to me. He said, I heard that you can help some people. I said, you know that I know who you are and what you've done to me in the past with those bad checks. I said, so I assume if you're coming to me, you must be desperate. Said, yeah, I am. I said, come back in an hour. We had filled a grocery cart up with the things that he needed, with things that are going to make a lot of different meals with it. I mean, there was about $150 worth of products in there. But this, I used the money that other people had given me. And, we sent him on his way. Much later, long after COVID, there was a lot of other things that happened because of COVID. But much later, his life turned around. He got a good job. He became one of my best customers. So it paid it back. And he told me one day, he said, I remember those checks. He said, I'm going to get those taken care of. And I said, I've forgotten about it. I said, we're long past that. I said, pay it forward. Help somebody else out when you can. COVID hit, and very early on, first March was a record month for us because of all the panic buying. We were kind of watching people. We put limits on toilet paper. We put limits on some of the other things. You don't need to fill your garage with these. All of the stores in the big city, all of the stores on the news, they're all out of all of these things. And we still had it for weeks yet because I had watched things, I had purchased ahead, and, we didn't have that issue. But they're talking about COVID and not understanding everything yet. And I'm hearing that if one of my employees comes down with it, anybody that's been in contact with that employee is going to have to quarantine for 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. Well, in my small store, that means that if one of my employees gets it, we're going to have to shut down because I'm going to have everybody, or maybe everybody but two people under quarantine, at best. So even though grocery stores were considered essential, I made the decision to close the store, close the front doors, and we did curbside only. The news channels from Omaha came down and did a story on that. And we didn't know what we were doing. We've never done this before. Now we're making our customers, call in their order, email in their order. I'm going on Facebook Live and walking around the store and trying to remind them about some of the things we've got on the shelf. We really had a tough time those first couple of days. It was exhausting. My employees were running. We had employees that were emailing their order in, and the email address may just say Big Red at AOL.com. Well, I don't know who this is. They didn't put their name on it. They didn't put their phone number on it. And the order says, I need milk. Well, how much milk? What size? I need bread. Give me some ground beef. We had to train our customers. We had to wait for them to email us back and say, you've got to give us a phone number. And, it took time. We bought a whole bunch of clipboards, more than we ever needed before, because now I've got 5 employees walking around the store trying to check off lists and get things rung up. We're learning how to mark those things and put them in the cooler. And this order's got 2 bags in the cooler and 3 in the freezer and 2 in this cart up front. Yeah, there were times that we missed certain things in the freezer, in the cooler, because, we didn't have them marked well enough and we had to learn how to do it. Our Secretary of State for Iowa started doing a shout out for businesses that were going above and beyond to keep their customers safe. The first business that they did that for was little old Mulholland Grocery in Malvern, Iowa, because of the things that we were trying to do to keep our community safe, keep our customers safe, and stay in business. CNN did a story online about, should grocery stores be closed now? Are they, with all of the customers that come in a grocery store each day, then they've got to be a beehive of activity and a breeding ground for COVID, very possibly. Stores are trying to learn. These big chain stores have, lots of lawyers and lots of executives in offices someplace that are working on learning how to do that. They've got IT specialists that are trying to set things up online. And they did a story online, and talked about three different grocery stores of different sizes all around the country, and we were one of them. CNN did a story on Mulholland.
Mhm.
Now they're talking to me. They want to have me on TV. And we've got that all set up because they want to learn how we're doing it and how we're trying to take care of our community. Well, something big happened about an hour before, and they cut out our segment and decided it wasn't going to happen. So, I didn't make that on TV, but we were still there. Customers, I'm still on the radio. I'm telling people what we're doing. We gained so many new customers from all of the surrounding communities from Omaha, from 40, 45 miles away, that they'd pull up out front. They'd honk and they'd roll down their windows that here's a list, and then we'd get done and we've got our mask on and we're put it in the trunk. There's a check in there. I wrote it for $10 extra for all of your trouble. Things like that were happening, or the customers are pulling up out front. I'll be there at 2 o'clock, and coming down to get the groceries. We had to shorten our hours because, we just were exhausting ourselves with what we were doing. March, as I said, was a record month. April was not too bad. Um, May came and some of the bigger stores are opening back up, but we weren't. And I just didn't think it was safe yet. May was our worst month we ever had by a big margin. And we made the decision we had to reopen our doors on June 1st. Boom, we were right back to where we had been before. We've got a lot of new products in the store because we've gained these new customers. And also because we couldn't get, if everybody remembers, there were so many shortages. We were dealing with ordering 300 cases of different products to come in for the store on our delivery, and we get 130. My Tuesday morning, I was supposed to get a delivery at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. There were times that didn't come until Thursday. My next delivery order had to be in Thursday morning. I haven't even got this one yet. So, I don't know what I'm going to be getting, things like that. We closed at 5 o'clock, 5:30, I guess it was, during COVID. And I get a phone call from one of my employees at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night. My parents just saw the semi go by. They lived out on the north edge of town, said, our delivery's coming. We didn't even know that. He called a couple of other employees, when groceries come in, yes, I can set those cans of green beans off to the side. They don't have to be dealt with. But all of the cheese, all of the meat, all of those frozen pot pies or whatever, the ice cream, that needs to be dealt with now.
Yeah.
My employees came, and they did what they needed. We worked until 10:30 that night. We're busting our butts. We're sweating like crazy because we're running so hard trying to get things put away, get them where they need to be, and we'll deal with these other things later. But the employees did that. I started yelling at my warehouse because they were doing things to us like that they weren't keeping us in the loop. Well, that Tuesday morning delivery, I just have to have an idea of when it's coming, and hopefully during our regular hours, because I can't keep asking my employees to help at all of these odd times. They did it, but I knew that they were going to be tired of it. And, I couldn't believe how generous they were with their times. I did everything I could to give them bonuses, things like that, to make sure that they were taken care of. But it was hard, and things finally got better with the warehouse, but it was only after lots of frustration.
Mm.
I know that I changed as a person. I was never, you see people that you would just describe as angry, that are going to, yell about any little thing that happens. And that's what I was becoming because of the pressures, the stress that I was under, because of not knowing if I was going to get any of this, not having any certain things that we needed for our customers for weeks at a time. We're trying to find a substitute. I can't get the tortillas that we normally carry. So what else is available? and there were so many more hours spent on that type of thing than what it had been before. When groceries would come in, my employees would take a yellow highlighter. The invoices would still show the items that we ordered but didn't get, and they'd start using a yellow highlighter on all of those things. We'd have whole pages where there might be one line where we actually did get the item. I can remember one time that, I ordered, I started keeping percentages of the different departments, and we didn't hit 50% on any of the departments
Mm.
for quite a while. But there were times where we got 12% of what we ordered for the dairy. I ordered 40 cases and I got six,
Yeah.
things like that. And trying to keep trying to use Facebook Live to keep the customers in the know. Said we're trying to get things here. I couldn't get the Tropicana orange juice, but we got Simply Orange, so what we do have, that we're doing the best that we can. And I don't have what we've normally carried, but here's a good substitute. And again, we have all of these new customers that are coming in. Hey, I used to buy this over here. Can you get that? Okay. So we tried. And as I said, we picked up a lot of new products that worked for us also. Some of them were just a temporary substitute. Some of them we learned that it was going to work for us. And we used that knowledge and experience and change the store up in ways like that. So again, gaining new customers because we're doing what was necessary, what was helpful for our customers, and they remembered. Some of them. I had a few people. When we did reopen, we required masks. I had a guy that used to be sheriff in our county came in one day, and I said, "I'm sorry, sir, you need to put a mask on." Oh, to hell with you, and stormed out. Well, I'm sorry I lost you as a customer, but I just kept six other people safe. It isn't about me being right. It's about me being able to keep my store open to
Yeah.
help you in the long run. So I wasn't trying to, lord it over anybody or be a dictator. I'm just trying to do what's best for everybody. And the way that I see it with the information that we've got at this time.
Which is almost none, like you said.
Yeah.
Like we don't know
Yeah.
anything.
I I had a tendon snap in my wrist about this time. So I'm at a doctor in Omaha, and I get there early. I run across the street to the hardware store. Do you have any plexiglass so that we can hang dividers down in front of the customers? And the guy that does that is out to lunch. I said, "This is what I want." Ordered that. They said it'll be about an hour. I said, "Fine." Got to go to the doctor. I come back. I pick it up, and he said, "You're lucky you came when you did." He said, "That was it. I'm out." And I see people all over Facebook, all over social media. Does anybody know where I can get some? All of these business owners are trying, and it's gone. You can't find it anywhere. I got lucky. There's been so many times that I've been lucky, and I know it and I appreciate it.
Mm, yeah, COVID was a game changer, but I think, as hard as it was, no doubt about it, for some more than others, what I saw from my store was people were so happy if you just showed up and did your best. They were so
Yeah.
forgiving. They were like so
Yes.
open to the substitute product. They're so open to calling and being like, hey, so my curbside order was supposed to have a couple cases of pop. Do you still have that? Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. It's right here. And we didn't grab it with your order. Okay, well, I'll run back in there and get it tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Just put my name on it. Like,
Yeah.
no, almost nobody was mad. And there were a couple who were just,
Yeah. Exactly.
whoa, man, like, what is this?
98% of the customers were extremely thankful,
Yes, absolutely.
and 90% of the customers. I grew up carrying out groceries and sacking groceries. And in all of that time, I probably got one or two tips. That I'm not standing there with my hand out or whatever. I wasn't raised that way. And I know that in some areas you're going to get that more. but probably 90% of our customers now are tipping, are adding more to their order, rounding it up, whatever.
Yeah.
But because they appreciated it, because they knew that we were doing everything that we could. Yeah, as I said, we had that 2% that screw you, sorry, but you know,
Which
I gained
uh,
more than I lost.
I agree. Exact same is that there were a very, very small percentage who didn't like the restrictions that we had put in place, and we did so much of the same stuff you did. It's uncanny.
Yeah,
But the ones who were verbally like supportive of that's why we're coming here is because you're
yeah,
doing this, because you're making sure that your people are safe, that the customers are safe. Like I was on Facebook Live talking to them, like, I'm doing what I can. And they were
yes,
like, I'm coming here because you guys are like the calm in the storm, like the eye of the storm. And there is that relief that they could have access to, and that was worth something to them. That has nothing to do with
right,
groceries. Just knowing that they're safe when they come there was huge.
right. I had commented earlier about the Facebook group that I'm in.
Yes.
I had never done a Facebook Live.
Mm,
And, all of these business owners in different industries or whatever, we're all asking questions because we're all facing a lot of the same type of things. And there were so many that had it worse than what I did. There were so many businesses that they were shut down.
right.
Their state said you can't have, you don't need to have this open and you're not an essential business. Things like that. So I was lucky, but these people taught me how to do Facebook Live. I've never done that before, but it's necessary now. The word pivot, came up and enough that you got sick of it. But seriously, that's what we're all doing. We're trying to figure out different ways that we could take care of our customers. And I'm holding the camera up here and I'm walking down the aisle and I'm showing you, oh, hey, we got a new type of wine in over here. We have not been able, we're trying, we have not been able to get this lately. It's been out of my warehouse for 6 weeks now, but over here we do have this.
Mhm, mhm.
And people would comment on there, hey, do you happen to have that? Do you happen to have this? Can you get that? And the support was there, as I said, from 98% of the people. But again, we're learning. The area chamber of commerce over in Glenwood started growing. It's now the Mills County Chamber. So that I've joined that and I've gotten more out of it than what my dues have been over the years. With the help that they've given me, and they're supporting all of the businesses. There's a picture of me uh, carrying out groceries with my mask on, and there's a sign beside me from the chamber, support local, and that's what it was all about. And as I said, May was our worst month ever, but the year still finished up very good because June came back immediately, and
Yeah.
things were so
We
much better.
we closed pretty much the same timeline. We closed, it was about March 15th that we closed and started doing curbside and delivery only. And then we reopened for the same exact reason, the beginning of June. It was like June 10th or 11th, something like that.
Yeah,
Um, and when we reopened, it was like ding, like there you go. Like they all were like right there, like ready to come back. And yeah, I think just like anything else in the grocery business, it was like listening to what they needed because the first couple
yeah,
months, it was like there were people coming to Cecil or to our store just because that's what we were doing. And then by month three, there were people who were not coming because that's what we were doing. And they were loud enough with their not coming that we were like,
yeah.
okay, we're back. Hello, wear your mask, please. Like, and it was so much about safety. Like, I'm not trying
Yes,
to be a hard ass for no good reason. I was in the same boat you were thinking we actually split into two teams so that it was never everybody there at the same time because that's how it was before. And like if we caught one
very
case,
good.
we're all done. And so we had
Yeah,
a 3 day and a 4 day, and we kind of take turns switching back and forth, and we operated half and half. And we did that for, several months even after we reopened. Um, and oh yeah. Grocery and COVID, I feel like we could honestly do a whole deep dive sometime just into
Oh
that
yeah.
because holy moly, like what we learned and all the pivots and everything else, it was such a transformative time. That yeah, I would love to dive back into that at some point. But as we kind of pre-planned it a little bit so that we would leave everyone here on a bit of a cliffhanger moment. And then we're going to come back with a part two to kind of continue with the story. But do you want to get us familiar with what is, as much of a turning point and as much of a transformation as COVID was, that wasn't the main turning point in the story. That was still to come. So give us a brief taste of that, and we'll come back to that on next episode.
One more quick thing about the
Yes,
COVID.
please.
I talked about my boss in Omaha was so fantastic. He retired about 3 months before COVID hit, and I'm thinking 6 months later about him. And he's worked 50 years in the grocery industry. He's, so smart, so intelligent, so experienced at what he does. And I'm facing things that he never even thought of and
Yeah.
never had to experience or deal with, and everybody in my industry is now, so that was a big change there. What you're talking about, the big changes in my story, COVID hit in 2020, and it kind of changed things. And we had a good, ended up the year well. 2021, we're having another good year. And personally, I was having a lot of issues. In mid-December, December 13th, I'd come home, and I'm now alone at home. I'd just been home about 15 minutes and I got a phone call, and they said, "You've got to get back down here. The store's on fire." And it burned to the ground that night. So that really has changed a lot of things for me.
I oh, can't imagine, you know? And that's what the next episode is for unpacking this wild ride of making an impact and how there can be a hairpin left turn at any moment. And that possibly, and I've heard a little bit of your story and I'm excited to hear more next time, but possibly, even when there is a dark cloud that comes, like maybe there's a silver lining, and that, every single stage along the way plays its role in the ultimate impact that we're here to make. And that sometimes, like I said at the beginning, it's not bright and shiny and happy and fluffy. Like sometimes it freaking sucks. And you're standing there with your heart breaking. And you don't give up because, like, that's not what this is. Like, you keep going. But how do I keep going? This is so hard. And that's what I really want to get into next time is the resilience that it takes to stay on the path. So, Tom, thank you so much for this first installment. I've so enjoyed getting to know you better and am excited for next time. Like we'll be ready for next time. It's going to be a big one, I think, to get to hear the full details of that part of the journey for you and kind of get fully up to speed with where we're at now. And so all of that will be here for next time. Um, there's also a trailer that I just recorded. Actually, I recorded it the same day that we're recording this, June 21st, 2023. But I'm guessing this episode is going to be released much later than the trailer. So if you haven't yet, check out the trailer because that is a nice little overview of kind of what this podcast is. And as we set sail, to mix my metaphors here, as we build the plane while we're flying it, we're going to continue to figure out exactly how we're going to navigate along this path. Like I told Tom before we started recording, we're going to wander and see where we end up. I do thank you for watching. Feel free to like and follow, and all of that really helps to support this finding other people out there who are ready to hear it. I do thank you for sharing it wherever feels good for you to share it. And until next time, do take care of yourself. I hope you'll be thinking a little bit about what might be even just one small act, one small resource that you have that you could make a phone call and cause a ripple effect of positivity out into the world. I do believe very strongly, as you'll probably come to know, that we all have something that we can give. So thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Hello out there, and welcome back to our second episode of My Grocery Adventure. My name is Carly Wharton, and I am your host. Today, I am joined again by Tom Mulholland. We will be continuing to dive into his story of creating an impact for his small community in Iowa. We did our first episode of My Grocery Adventure with him as well. So if you're curious about his backstory, his upbringing, kind of all the parts that lead up to what we're going to be adding on to the story today, we left you on a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of that first episode as far as a really, really challenging point in any person's story. To go through a fire, to go through something that's so destructive and kind of one fell swoop to have the rug be pulled out from under you. So that's what we're really going to dive into in this second episode, the turmoil that absolutely had to have been, and the road to rebuilding and the perseverance and resilience that it takes to do such a thing. So lots to get into in today's episode, possibly some heavy territory, but that's life. And before we dive in, I do want to welcome Tom Mulholland back to My Grocery Adventure. Welcome back.
Good morning, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we get into your story of kind of where we left off last time with that phone call of the store is on fire and we need you to get back down here, go ahead and tell us like about this picture that you have behind you that you're using as your backdrop.
This is a mural that was painted on the side of my building. It was paid for by a grant from the Iowa Cultural Affairs Department, and our local artist, same artist that painted the painting I used for my backdrop last week, did that. Zach Jones owns the Iowa Art Church and is an amazing artist. I won the statewide business pitch contest years ago. One of the things that I commented about for my community is how some local talents had seen that they could prosper here in our community, thanks to what I was doing possibly, and had moved back. Zach had a studio down in the Phoenix area and had come back to Malvern, has been very successful, has traveled around the country doing murals for other people. He is very well known here in the Midwest and different areas around the country. But this was something that I allowed. They asked my permission to put on the side of the building, and I was thrilled to have it. Our town has a 63-mile long bike trail that goes through the heart of our community. It's called the Wabash Trace Nature Trail. It goes from Council Bluffs, Iowa, down to the Missouri state line. And this is a person on a bicycle on an area of the trace that is well recognized. And it brought so many bicyclists to sit in the park next to my building to enjoy that, to come in and buy drinks or salads or things like that. Our community was blessed with the positioning of where we were on this trail. It was just a great stopping point for many people, and it really made my business more popular and well known. And it's all of these little things that you can take advantage of that can really help any business, no matter what type of business you are.
Like tying in with what's going on in the community, kind of like you were
Yes.
talking about last time. Yeah.
Yes.
There was there's such a thing as called community capital, and like basically the idea is that you're taking advantage of kind of the assets that your community already has, so the bike trail and playing that up on the side of your store.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, if you want to talk a little bit more about why meat cutting? Like, why was that what drew your focus and kind of the whole career, the school, the experience? I mean, it looks like it worked out really well, but I'm curious how you got started on that path.
Honestly, it was just timing was the issue. I had worked in the grocery store carrying out groceries when I was younger, Saturdays, summers, things like that. Um, when I had graduated from high school, just about that time, one of the meat cutters at the store left and they were looking for help. And, okay, fine, I'll give that a try. I enjoyed working at the store. I enjoyed waiting on the customers, having the chance to talk to them. And I started doing that. My dad's partner, Cork, was an excellent meat cutter, very well experienced. Um, and I learned quite a bit from him. But after a couple of years, I kind of had the idea that I could probably learn more if I went to a school and I could learn other methods besides what his normal things were. I could learn quicker than
Mhm.
what I could in a small town like this. And I thought that that would be a good way to improve my lot in life, improve, the store for the future by being a better meat cutter, knowing how to do different things and having different experiences. So I did that. Western Iowa Tech Community College in Sioux City offered a meat cutting program that was about 6 months to 2 quarters. And, I went up there and I took that. And I really enjoyed it. I had been cutting meat for a little bit before that, um, because I had more experience than the others in the class. They called me Tom Terrific, just teased me about that. But I was always very bright, and it wasn't just about meat cutting. We had to take other classes also. We had to take a microbiology class to learn about food safety.
Mhm.
Uh, and I excelled in that very well. It was something I'd had the background for from high school. We had to take some basic English courses so that we could learn how to fill out a resume or a cover letter, things like that to help our possible positioning later in life. Basic math classes, which I just tested out. They wanted you to be able to do the things you need to as a meat cutter.
Mhm.
But it was a good time in my life. I was running, and I actually had the time to run a lot. I'd run one marathon before that in 4 hours and 43 minutes, and without training for it properly. Now I had the time. I joined the YMCA while I was in Sioux City. They had a student rate. I had the time after classes each day. I ran the Lincoln Marathon that year, and I ran 3 hours and 6 minutes. I cut over an hour and a half off of my time. And
You're talking a full 26-mile marathon
yeah,
in
yeah.
3 hours? What kind of an average mile is that?
I think that was a little over 7 minutes if I remember right. But
7 minutes,
running,
26 times.
yeah, but running that time had never been on my you know thoughts. Now I'm very close to the qualifying standards for the Boston Marathon. You had to break at my age, you had to break 3 hours back then to run the Boston Marathon. And I kept trying. I made like 7 more attempts over the next 10 years and got so close 306, 303, 302, 310, 301. And then finally, a few years later, I ran a 255 marathon and ran the Boston Marathon the following year. That was right when I changed jobs and started working in Omaha, commuting. So I didn't have quite the time to train, but it was still a lifelong goal that I was able to achieve. And it also shows something that has stuck out very often in my life that I don't give up.
Yeah.
I'm going to overcome whatever I have to do something.
I get
And I've done that many times in my life, and business is just like that.
mm, wow. Gosh. So 8 attempts to be able to
I
go to
think that was
Boston.
right. Yeah,
Yeah. So what
yeah.
year did you actually run it then?
qualified at the 1988 Lincoln Marathon, and I ran the 1989 Boston Marathon then.
I was born in 1988. I don't know if you know that. We were doing something slightly different at that time. Oh, that is so freaking cool. And I love that connection that, that determination
Yeah.
doesn't just come out in a business setting. It's just who you are.
One of my grade school teachers had me come back and talk to a class at one point about going for your goals and having goals, first of all, and not letting life stop you, doing whatever it took to do that, to meet your goals and to enjoy your life better because you do have aspirations and think you can do better things.
Yeah. Has having goals, is that something that just kind of always was part of who you are, or was there a role model that you had that taught you to set
I
goals?
think it was basically just me. I'd always enjoyed running track and field, watching road races here in Iowa, the Drake Relays or something big. And I never qualified for the state championships or the Drake Relays when I was in high school. So after running the Boston Marathon, my next goal was the Drake Relays. They had one race that they called the Masters 800 meters, half a mile basically, and you had to be 40 years of age to do it. I was conference champion in the half mile in the 880 when I was in high school, and I was still running a lot back in those days. I was winning races still at the age of my upper 30s occasionally. And I set my sights on the Drake Relays. And I did run that Masters 800. There was 33 in the race. It was the biggest crowd they'd ever had for that. 33 of us starting on the curve on a track was too much, and they had to stop the race twice and restart it because I got knocked down. It wasn't just somebody random; it was me. But I ended up running only 4 seconds slower at the age of 40 than what I ran as an 18-year-old senior in high school. So again, I put my heart out there. I put the effort into it for a number of years to get what I wanted out of that. I was hoping for even a little bit better, but I was very happy with that.
Sure. So do you still run?
I, I had foot problems that arose a number of years later, and just last fall, I had major foot surgery to fix those. It was something that had been bothering me for a decade, and it's possible that I may be able to run again in the future. We'll have to see. I've got 21 pieces of titanium in my foot now.
Jeez.
Uh, so we'll see, but I'm walking better than I had for a decade. So,
Yeah. So is
and,
that,
and the issue with my foot was not running related. I double checked with my podiatrist about that. It
yeah,
wasn't just because I beat myself to death over the years. So,
could have been. You did a lot, but that's awesome. Wow. I do love that, like how it is just your personality to be that determined,
yeah,
which absolutely comes in pretty handy given what you've had to face these last couple of years. Um, so yeah, where we left off in the last conversation was December 2021. So we're well past the beginning of COVID. COVID was its own Olympic sport of trying to run a grocery store during the global pandemic. More about that in episode 1 if you're interested. And then we get to December of 2021. You came home from the store that day and your phone rings. Why don't we pick it up right there and take us through what happened next?
I had been home about 15 minutes, and I just turned the TV on and was chilling for a little bit. Hadn't decided what I was going to do for supper yet, and my phone rang, and it was one of my employees, and Jason said, "You've got to get back down." And then a long pause, and the store's on fire. So I rushed out of the house, left my phone laying on the arm of the chair, and flew back down to the store. And I ran in and I set my keys down someplace as I ran in. I don't even know. There was one employee that was up front still. and there was a little bit of smoke coming from the back room that you could see. I opened up the door to the back room, and it was just pitch black. There was so much smoke that I couldn't see my hand 6 inches in front of my face. I grabbed a fire extinguisher, and every now and then I might see a flicker of a flame someplace, but I grabbed the fire extinguisher and I emptied it just blindly into the back room. And I knew that I wasn't doing any good. So I pulled that door shut. I went into my office for a moment, and I, I didn't know what to do, really. I reached into the safe and I took the money bag out of there, and there didn't seem to be too much else I could do. I ran back up front, and as I was going up the central aisle of the store, there's smoke coming through the floor around me. That employee had gone out the front door. There was nobody else in the store at that time. I opened up the cash registers and took the two drawers out of there and put them in the front seat of my pickup that I had parked out front, locked it. We've got the empty lot on the side of my building there. And I ran around the store and to the back alley, and there was a fire truck just to the right of my store and another one to the left of my store. And behind the store, we had a bin area that we threw our empty boxes in, uh, wooden enclosed. And a few of the boxes were burning, and Jason, my employee, and one of the um, firemen were pulling those out of there. They had a spigot mounted on the front of the bumper of that fire truck, and they were hosing that area down. You could see through some vents into the basement of the store. These boxes were partially burnt, but you could see through these vents into the basement of the store, and it was completely engulfed in flames as far as I could see. The fire truck from the other end of the alley had laid a hose up on my loading dock, and I ran up there and I grabbed that fire hose, and I didn't know what I was doing. I remembered over the years when I was in grade school or whatever fire safety training, feel the door before you open it up. It wasn't hot. I opened up the door, and now I'm seeing into the back room, just the opposite side from where I was before. And I could see flames everywhere. The walls were covered. They were climbing up the walls on that. And I turned the fire hose on and tried, you know, putting out parts of the fire. I turned different directions. Things blew back at me at one point. I don't know if it was because I hit one of the electrical panels or, some other reason. The coat that I had on, I hadn't even taken my coat off when I got home yet, but the coat that I had on had burn marks all up and down one sleeve. I got burned on the back of one hand where embers blew back at me. But I could see that there wasn't anything I could do, or even if there was 10 firemen, that they were going to be able to do. The flames were just everywhere, including I had a very high ceiling. You could see how old this building was. And the ceiling in the back room was like 17, 19 feet. And it was on fire. So I used the handle on that hose and pulled the door shut. And I just walked away at that point. There were fire trucks all over. I went back out front, and by that time, I decided I didn't have my keys with me. I laid them down someplace in the store. I wanted to go back in and find them, and they wouldn't let me. Um, we had a cage on the front part of the store for propane canisters, and the firemen wanted to get those tanks out of the way. And they were there with bolt cutters on the padlock. I said, I can just run inside and grab the key. No, don't go in there. We didn't know how safe the floor was or anything like that. And I think I would have been all right, but it's probably best I didn't take, what difference does one padlock make compared to losing the whole store and possibly blowing everybody else up? But they took all of those propane tanks and moved them far away from there. The store basically burned to the ground. It burned all night long. There were 20 some fire departments that showed up from all over Southwest Iowa. Glenwood and Shenandoah had aerial trucks that they brought in. I did not see parts of Malvern had burned over the years, large parts of our downtown area, because all of the buildings were conjoined. The empty lot beside my store had been because one building had collapsed years ago and was torn down, partially collapsed and torn down. Everything north of there had burned at one point, and they rebuilt a building for a doctor's office now. But having seen that at times in my life, it's exactly what I expected to happen. I didn't see any way that they were going to be able to save all of those buildings you could see south of mine. That was the former bakery and a bar and our new pharmacy were down there, and apartments above the pharmacy, apartments above, or an apartment for the owners of the bakery was above the bakery there. Because of all of those fire departments that came from all over, they were able to save it. Those aerial trucks made such a huge difference. It's a small town. The firefighters emptied our water tower in their efforts to fight this fire. Farmers were bringing tank wagons in, and they were filling up portable things that they set up with canvas or whatever on the street to provide more water for the firefighters. They were drawing out of there. We're about 35 miles from Omaha. All of the news channels from Omaha were there, and people were grabbing me. I mean, I was walking around. Some of the police were pushing me away, further away from the fire where they had things cordoned off. I was just a total mess, a total loss that evening. Um, One reporter did interview me, and I don't know what I said, but it was just devastating. I'd had the store for 13 and a half years at that point, and it was gone. And it wasn't just me; it was my great grandfather, my father, all of the people that had worked there over those years. Had put their heart and soul into it, and I was devastated. It it took a lot out. I barely slept that night. The next day, there were still little areas that were smoldering inside. The front of the building was still standing, but the roof had collapsed. Part of this north wall, just about where you can see here, was still standing, but behind that had collapsed. And like where my office was now 6 feet down into the basement. You couldn't you couldn't see you couldn't get in the door because the floors had collapsed everywhere. I could see in the back of the store where a new freezer was that we'd put in a year before that. The sunlight was coming through the hole in the roof, or the completely missing roof. You could still see pizzas in that freezer, but you couldn't get there because there's no floor between here and there. You could see different things that were around in different areas. Lots of television reporters and things that were all over. About 6 o'clock that morning, the one of my counselors from my grocery warehouse called the night before. We were supposed to get a delivery. The fire was on a Monday night. We were supposed to get a delivery and had sent the order for Tuesday morning delivery. And I called the dispatcher and I said, cancel our order. Store's gone. My counselor called me about 6 or 6:30 in the morning. He said, we're so sorry. What can we do for you? I'm totally devastated. I don't know. The one thing that came to mind was that my community has no water. I said that, once the firemen emptied out that water tower, even after it refills, it needs time for things to settle, any sediment or whatever. So I said that my community has no water. Please send something. By 9:30 that morning, there was a semi with 5 pallets of 24 packs and gallons of water. And I had nothing better to do. I'm down helping unload that. We called uh, a farmer's co-op and said, "Can you please bring a forklift up here?" And they did. And we're unloading that, and a woman walks up to me, and I didn't know who she was, but what do you do here in the community? I said, "That's my store." And she was a reporter, and she said she'd been talking to lots of people already. And she said, "I'm not surprised at all that you're here doing this when your whole life has fallen in around you. You're here trying to help others." But I just didn't have anything else on my mind. There wasn't anything else I could do. You know, the state fire marshal was across the street. Anytime there's a business fire, of course, the first person that they look at is the business owner. And my insurance company, my agent was standing on the corner watching the fire the night before and said, well, we'll get everything taken care of. They sent down a couple of investigators. Something I haven't mentioned yet was that I was also going through a divorce that was just occurring at this time. So there's another red flag for the investigators. There were 5 investigators that looked everything over, and it was a very grueling few days between the devastation of losing the store, the people wondering if I had done this or whatever. 2 days after the fire, a horrible storm came through, and the wall blew down. That wall that was still standing blew down. There was somebody that had a video camera set up across the street, and they captured that, and it can be found on YouTube. But that didn't matter. I mean, yes, it was just another nail in the coffin, but it was already gone. So in the long run, that didn't bother me that much or mean that much more. The far wall, the wall, conjoining wall with the bakery, had damage, and they weren't sure just how bad things were. So this fire occurred in December, but it was June before the debris was cleaned up because the structural engineers could not decide whether that wall was safe, whether it was stable enough that they could bring big equipment in here. And like I said, it was another 6 months then before the mess got cleaned up. And by then, the downtown area was really beginning to smell bad with all of the things that were in the freezers, the coolers, all of the meat that I had stayed cool through the winter after it got half cooked. But now lots of flies, lots of issues. And we're doing the best that we can, but unfortunately, that's just the type of situations that I've faced all along since then. It just seems like one delay after another, and another situation pops up that keeps things from happening like I expected. So yeah,
Yeah. Like I try to empathize and put myself in the shoes of like, you pull back up at the store and you unlock the door and like set your keys down somewhere because yeah, I can only imagine. Like,
yeah,
and like you said, like I go into my office, like, and then it's just I don't know what to do. Like it's
Yeah.
so big and it's being taken away so fast that like
I had I had commented in the previous episode about having won an award from Facebook, I believe. And it had arrived earlier that afternoon, was sitting on my desk, and it burned. I certainly didn't think to get that. My billfold was on my desk right behind that award. I'd forgotten about it when I went home that evening. I hated sitting on my billfold when I'm doing paperwork, so I'd take it out, put it on my desk. That was destroyed. I asked someone to take me home that evening so that I could get a spare set of keys and move my truck because it was parked right in front of the store and the firefighters need to be in there. The building could collapse on top of it. And, I went and I got my spare set of keys and I grabbed my phone. My daughter had been calling frantically, my ex-wife, because, they'd heard from people around town. They'd seen it on Facebook about what was happening, but they didn't know if I was safe or what was going on. So I called, them and or one of them, I don't even remember, and said, pass the message along. I'm fine, but you know, totally devastated. I had to turn my phone off because I had so many texts, so many messages, so many calls coming in. The next morning, I had well over 200 messages that had come in over the past few hours. I had to go to Glenwood, the next town over, that morning. We had just unloaded the water, and I'm driving over there. I needed to get a new driver's license because my billfold was gone. That was one of the things I was doing. But my phone rang. I had all of the notifications for text messages and messages off, but the ringer was still on. It was the governor calling me. She and I had become acquainted and friends after winning that business contest, and she was calling and saying, how sorry she was and that, the state would do whatever they could to help me. And, there's one type of grant that our state has called the Emergency Catalyst Grant. And, she promised that one to me. That'll have to go through the city actually, but, that's been taken care of and will help a little bit on our rebuilding efforts as that happens. So,
what was it like? Because I mean, again, I can't even imagine what it's like to have the store burn down, like you're saying, of your dad's life, your grandfather's life, like all the people who had poured their heart and soul into it. So to like lose that, it it just is like numbing. That's like all I can feel is numb at
yeah,
how incomprehensible it is. But then to also have the added stress of they think you did it. Like,
yeah,
were you so like okay because like you just knew that you didn't? But yeah, what was that like? I mean, that's like a whole nother head trip on top
yeah.
of an
It
insane amount
was, and you know, there were a few people around town, of course, that said, "I think he did it." There's always going to be. You just like anything else, the best you can hope for is to please 97% of the people or something.
of.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but I know I've always known that I had no idea what it was. The investigation went on for months. It They brought a backhoe in early February and were able to dig out some pieces of equipment. We had replaced one compressor just a few days before the fire, and it appeared that possibly the fire had started in the same general vicinity, the basement. So they did dig that out. They were able to rule that out between those five investigators because the neighboring building, their insurance company wanted an investigator there. And they had an independent one to, double check on everybody else, things like that. So there were five different investigators that were going through everything. In the end, their combined opinion that it was careless smoking by an employee, which, if that were the case, that would have meant where those boxes were that I mentioned a while ago. Those boxes were only partially burned, but yet inside the building, behind that, you could see that the whole basement was engulfed in flames. So, in my mind, knowing what I saw, they're incorrect about that. I think it was something electrical in that basement, and then it came out and caught those boxes partially on fire.
Yeah.
But they that was an opinion. That was the best they could do. They couldn't ever pin it down on anything, and but they also couldn't completely say that I didn't do it. So while I wish they had been able to find the cause for that reason, that they could have cleared me completely. 98% of the people, know me, believe me, but you can't please everybody. For the rest of my life, there's always going to be a few people that wonder about that and say, I heard someone recently had been spouting off and said that they thought my ex-wife had done that. And I had a talk with, she's 100 miles away where she was living. And, I said that there was no way and they needed to quit talking like that. But, the investigators also reached out to her. And, what do you think about the possibility of Tom having done it? She said, no. She said that's part of our problem is the hours that he spends at work. That's his baby, and he's not going to burn that down. And so I appreciated that, and tried to do what I could to show my innocence or whatever.
Yeah.
There's just no way to prove something like that.
Hmm. That feels like a larger life lesson that we all learned somewhere along the way of like, yeah, when your innocence isn't provable and other people get to think whatever they want
Yeah,
and you just have to like deal. You just have to
yeah,
like be okay with it. Yeah. Do you feel like you've gotten better at like kind of letting people think whatever they want and
yeah.
not?
And there's a few different things that I've had to change my attitude about or whatever. People were, I've talked earlier about people coming up and giving me money to help those flood victims or COVID. Well, now I had people coming up and giving me money to help me. That that was hard. While we were unloading that water, there was a woman walking across the street, and she had 5 smoked turkeys ordered for the following weekend that she was going to give as Christmas presents to some of her friends. And I yelled across the street to her. I said, Marilyn, I'm so sorry, but your turkeys are overdone. I had to try to find a little bit of humor.
You do.
And she hadn't noticed me up until then. And she said, don't leave. She was a block from home. She ran back home and she came back. And this is about the time that this woman is interviewing me now, this reporter. And she gave me an envelope I put in my pocket. And later that day when I got home, I found that in my pocket and remembered, and I opened it up and $800 in cash in there. There were so many people that put $1,000 in my bank account or sent me a check or something like that, trying to help me come back to help the community. The bank started a GoFund Malvern page, and people from across the country were doing what they could, and I appreciated that. The Facebook group that I've commented about, I had put a post up Monday afternoon thanking everyone for this award that I had just won. And then later in the evening, I put another post up. I said 90 minutes after my earlier post. My building burned to the ground. It's gone. And these people were reaching out. How can we help? What can we do? And I know that there were many that donated to this fund. I would never have asked for anyone to do that, but they shared the link in the group, and that self promotion is against the rules of the group, and I would never have wanted that, but they pinned that right to the top for a few days. There were other people that were already personal friends out of the group because we enjoyed each other so much that were sharing this and doing all they could, and I had a very hard time accepting people trying to help me. And a friend finally told me at one point, because I'm the one that's trying to help everybody else, that, I don't want people helping me. That's just not in my nature. And my friend told me to look at it as a that they are giving to the future of our community, that they're helping that future out. And that made things easier to deal with, but I still had a very hard time. My employees had lost their jobs. I couldn't pay them. I didn't have any checks. They'd all burned up. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have any credit cards. They were in my billfold. The bank got me some checks as quickly as possible. I called my CPA and sent him some information. All I had for a computer was a tablet and my phone because I didn't have anything at home. I just never used one, and my wife had taken hers when she left. A person went and bought a computer and a printer for me, which I paid back once I had the ability, once I had checks. Um, the CPA figured out what the paychecks would be, and I got the employees paid. The fire was on Monday. Monday was payday. There was a few employees that hadn't picked up their check for the week yet. So they were doubly hurting. Insurance was going to pay my employees for 60 days. But, it was a struggle for so many ways. My QuickBooks were on the computer that burned. I thought I had backed things up, but I couldn't find anything on the flash drive that I was sure it was on. My CPA helped me download QuickBooks onto the new laptop that I had bought, that the friend had bought for me. Bev was unbelievable and doing anything she could to help me. And I thought I was going to have to rebuild 9 months of my QuickBooks because the last backup that we could find was what I had given my CPA to do the taxes the previous March. So I thought we were going to have to rebuild that. A few days later, I tried that flash drive again. Now, because I had downloaded QuickBooks onto the computer, it would show that hidden file. So I had to redo, I think it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks since my last update. But I learned a few things about, having more and multiple backups, having redundancy on things like that. So you got to learn the hard way, having things in the cloud or whatever. As I've said before, this gray hair is because I'm old school, because I'm old, so some of the technological things that younger people take for, granted, are foreign to me, not things I grew up with or am used to doing. So, I don't always take the best methods or the easiest methods that are out there now. And I'm sure there's plenty of other people that are like that. So,
What you were saying about accepting help being a struggle, um, I just find it really interesting that that's like one of the things this situation forced you to confront. Like you said, you had to change your attitude about it. I
yeah,
love what your friend said. I mean, they're not handing money to just any person. They've watched what you do and they've seen you show up over and over and over. And it's like they're voting for you to get to keep doing what you're doing. You're an asset. And
I didn't use the proper word. What she told me was they are investing in your
yeah,
community's future.
yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. There, it's an investment in you, you getting on your feet and what you're capable of when you're on your feet. Like
yeah.
they want you back in action is what it sounds like to me. And yeah, I wonder, do you think it's like just a generational thing or what what makes it extra difficult to think about someone helping you?
I don't think it's generational. I just think it's my makeup. And, again, I've commented about this Facebook group um, numerous times, but so many people have reached out and said that, they've seen how I don't give up in the face of a struggle, how I keep working towards that goal and how much it inspires them and means to them. And I'm not doing it for them, I'm doing it for me, but I do appreciate that. And again, it's what I said about that Boston Marathon attempt. I don't give up. And there's been so many struggles, so many delays, so many things that have worked against me as I'm trying to do this. But we're still plugging along and doing what's necessary and trying to make the best of the future and make that future happen as soon as possible. It
Yeah.
doesn't always seem that way with all of the delays and all of the problems that I faced, but it's true. I had replacement cost coverage insurance, which in my mind means that I'm okay. The building will be rebuilt. It doesn't. There's a cap on that. And insurance isn't going to be enough. So I'm way short on the money that I need. And we're trying to figure out how to get that. I'm looking for any possibilities that I can find, but I'm not slowing down in my efforts to rebuild. I'm going full speed ahead. I'm 63 years old. I'm gambling my retirement and my future, but I'm bringing that store back because my community needs it, because there isn't anything else. There's people that can't easily get the things that they need. So I'm going to do that no matter what it takes. And I'm facing all sorts of challenges and struggles, but I'm still going ahead. There's people that have said that I'm not hurrying through this because I'm still out there searching for money and on a publicity tour. And that's not true at all. I've had opportunities that have come to me, uh, and I appreciate them, and they've helped tell my story and bring to light the struggle and the things that I'm trying to do. But I'm not seeking these out, and I'm not going slower because I'm trying to find that money. It's not that I'm waiting until I've actually got the money in hand before I start the rebuild. It just hasn't happened for other reasons that are out of my control.
Yeah.
And I'm doing everything I can to get that rectified and to get things going as quickly as possible.
Which again, I feel like there's a life lesson in that because basically nothing is inside of our control. Almost
Yeah.
nothing, you know? So when you think about we can personally go full speed ahead and the world just may not cooperate, you know? Like it doesn't owe us its cooperation. You can have a heart of gold and the purest of intentions and still hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And if anything, it feels like, you know, there is such a valuable example in all of this for anybody who takes it in my opinion. I know I definitely have been inspired by your story to like specific example, I was still ordering produce up until very recently. And it was one Sunday morning, and I was like going to the store so I could look at my produce and like get my list together. And for half a second, I had the thought, oh God, I gotta go do this. And like, just for a second, like I would rather skip this part and do something different. And then you popped into my head. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna like channel Tom today, and I'm gonna go look at my store that is standing, and I'm gonna go look at my produce cooler that has food in it, and I'm gonna give freaking thanks that I get to go to the store today and order produce. It completely did a 180 on me in that moment. And that morning, I ordered produce with love because of knowing your story and knowing that, like, it could be taken away at any moment. Like you can go from having it to not having it in any moment. Don't take it for granted. And so that's something that, like, you don't have to be a grocery store owner to understand that. And, again, I go back to people are going to think whatever they want to think. And their narrative about what you're doing is so much more a reflection of them than it is of you. But I know I'm grateful to get to hear your story. And I hate that there's this delay for your community getting back its store. But I trust that this is bringing the pieces together the way that they need to be brought together. And, in the end, your perseverance, you don't give up. So I have no doubt that Malvern is on its way to having a store. And I would love if we could come back in a third episode and talk about the road to rebuilding, the the actual process of like, okay, so now there's no store there. What do I do next? Like it's not like you just snap your fingers, wave a magic wand, and there's a grocery store. Um, it's a huge process to build something from the ground up, let alone, like you were saying, just even the cleanup took 6 months. Just even the fire investigation took several months. So how does that sound if we come back on the next episode and talk about the road to rebuilding and what that's
Sure.
been like?
Sure. As I've said, the opportunities that have come my direction, have been unbelievable.
Yeah. Your story is kind of unbelievable, and it's heartbreaking, but even in the darkest moment, that's when you see the silver lining on the cloud. That's when you see the light that truly is real and shining. Even in the darkness, you can see it. And
These people that tell me how inspiring I am, or things like that, and I tell them I don't feel that I'm anything special. All I'm trying to do is the right thing, the way that I was brought up. And apparently that's extremely rare anymore, the way people react. And I, it's just second nature to me. That's what I'm trying to do and what I want to do. It isn't for me. I could walk away and retire right now, but my community would never have a grocery store again if I did that. It's just too much to try to build one from scratch, and it wouldn't be able to pay for itself. But I can bring one back with the insurance, with the help of others.
hmm. And so you told me on a different conversation, but you want to bring the store back and then retire like in the next like 5 to 10 years. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I'm 63 now. My original thought was that I would probably work another 4 or 5 years, something like that. I did have someone offer me a forgivable loan, but I had to commit to 5 years for that. And that means 5 years after I get started, after the store reopens. So it's more than what I wanted, but that's what was necessary to bring it back for my community. So I've agreed to that.
Mm,
So, and maybe things will be going great right then, and I won't want to go at that time. We'll see.
yeah, yeah. Mm. The way tragedy allows our common humanity to come to the surface, and like the people who show up and give you money, the people who, reach out and empathize with the struggle that you're going through, the people who just want to tell your story just because they want to help, raise the profile on your fundraising efforts.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, that's a perfect note. Do you want to show us your shirt and tell us about that?
Yeah. I've got a friend, this is the Phoenix. And next week or next episode, I'll have my background being a painting that this same local artist, Zach Jones, did called Rise of the Phoenix, as Mulholland rises from the ashes. But a friend started this fundraiser on Bonfire, and I believe, and we'll put the link up here. I believe off the top of my head, it's Bonfire slash support Mulholland's, but we'll have the correct one here. But this is just one of a few different things that we're working on and trying to bring more money in to rebuild the store, for my community.
Beautiful. We'll definitely get more into the details, the journey of rebuilding that you've already been on, and kind of where you are in that process and what all would be left, what all goes into building a store. Just in general, I think not a lot of people deal with a ground up construction project in their lifetime, and probably just don't even have any reference point on what actually goes into that process. So I think that would be cool.
And that's where I started.
Yeah, was no background, no experience.
Yeah.
Whole nother thing for you to get to learn. Great. You're good at that, apparently. So cool. Oh gosh. I am very grateful to have gotten to hear your story and to get to hear the the turmoil that's possible, and that, never ever are we going to see it coming, and that blindsided, devastated feeling that can happen. And then it literally is the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's, just because the old form got burned to nothing doesn't mean that those ashes don't put themselves back together into something that possibly has an even greater value to deliver to the world and to your community. And I have to believe that everything happens for a reason, basically, and that this will be no different, that in the end, in the long run, Malvern will win as a result of what they've had to persevere through. And so, yeah, thank you for everything that you're doing for your community and this community, telling your story and letting us all see that, as often as we can give thanks for what we have, you just never know what.
In your intro to, the podcast, you said that this is about helping others and showing how you can inspire people. And, I do appreciate that I have been able to do that in certain ways. Again, that isn't my goal. My goal is just to do the right thing. And that does it. That helps. That inspires people in some ways.
Yeah, just being
I'm
yourself.
glad I can do that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You just show up and be you. And it's huge. The ripple effect is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. This has been the second episode of My Grocery Adventure. Once again, my total pleasure to get to connect with Tom and share this story. We will be back on a next episode very soon. Until then, I do hope that you'll take really good care of yourselves, give thanks for everything that you have, and we'll see you again soon. All right, bye. Hello out there, and welcome back to the next episode of My Grocery Adventure. My name is Carly Wharton, your host, and this is a podcast for people who want to make an impact. If you're listening only, do know that there is also a YouTube channel where you can see our faces and get the full effect of these conversations. I would also love if you could like the video or subscribe or follow whatever platform you're on. Those little nudges tell the algorithm that you want more people to see this content. So we definitely appreciate you helping us to push this out there into the world for other people who want to make an impact. So this is our third episode, as I said, and this is our third installment also with Tom Mulholland of Mulholland Grocery up in Malvern, Iowa. Tom has already appeared on 2 episodes, so if you've watched those, you're fully up to date. If not, this episode might feel a little bit out of context, but I think you'll still get a lot out of it, even if you haven't seen the first two. By all means, feel free to watch them in order or not, whatever you prefer. Um, this episode, The Road to Rebuilding, we have covered a lot of Tom's story so far, including upbringing and how he initially got into the grocery business, which actually was over a century in the making, with his family starting the store and handing it down through the generations. It did get out of the family there at one point, but him purchasing it brought it back into the family. The pandemic was a part of that first episode. We talked about how crazy it was to be the manager of a grocery store, the owner of a grocery store during the front lines of a global pandemic. That was wild times. So that was that first episode. The second one, we talked about a true tragedy as far as Mulholland Grocery, in business for over 100 years in the family, burning to the ground, and really nothing being able to be salvaged from that, and experiencing a total loss as not just the owner of an asset, and this is your livelihood, but other people's livelihoods, all the jobs that went up in smoke in that instant, and all of the people's food access that went up in smoke in that instant, that now they have to drive further away to get their groceries because Mulholland's isn't there right down the street anymore. So, like I said, true tragedy is what I feel Tom has faced. He might tell you something different. And especially in this episode, where we are going to, more get to hear about what's happened since then. What was the immediate aftermath? That was kind of in that second episode where we talked about getting the fire cleaned up and how strenuous of a process that even was. And that's where we'll be picking it up. So I know that, I think it was like 6 months that it took for the insurance agents to do their investigation and finally come and clear away the debris. So we're in the middle of, what was it, June of 2022, thereabouts, when the debris is getting cleaned up. So we'll kind of pick it up right there, because that part, which was already 6 months in the making, was at the same time only being able to kind of get the slate clean so you could even think about whatever came next. So where do you even begin at a moment like that? Had you worked during that 6 months to kind of go ahead and line up the rebuilding, or was it more the middle of 2022 when you kind of switched gears into rebuilding?
I was doing what I could, and one of the things that I have said very often is that I was completely out of my realm. I had no idea what I was doing. I tell people that I've never put up a garden shed before. So building a commercial building is not something I knew anything about. The town believed in the store. The town needed the store. There's a young lady here in town, Leslie, that works for an architectural engineering firm in Omaha and has an office in Glenwood, one of our neighboring towns. She grew up right down the street from me, and she believed that the store was something that was absolutely necessary and knew that I needed help. And she has been fantastic, has been my right hand person. She's had so many things going on in her life also. Just about the same time, her mother passed away from cancer. She got married. So I'm not the only thing in her mind, but she's been fantastic for me. Helped to guide me, helped me pick out people that could help me tremendously in what we're doing. We chose an architect that has his office in Des Moines, which is about 120 miles away from Malvern, for those that don't know. But he specializes in small downtown projects, the older buildings like what you can see behind me. That's what we had. That is my building there, and that's my sign that we,
Isn't that cool?
something that I really love. Yeah,
I've never
and
seen
we're
anything like it. It's
being rebuilt also, so
oh
that we
good.
can get that back
Good.
there, being redone. But so I tried to find important members of the team and people that could help me along. Um,
When did you start working with Leslie? Like at what point did you make that connection?
the fire was in December, and she reached out to me, and said that she would love to help me in any way that she could. I don't know when it was, but it was very early on, uh, very possibly within the first couple of days. I don't know. Or maybe it was it took about a month for me to decide and announce that, yes, I was going to rebuild because
Oh,
I'm at the age where rebuilding and putting all of that effort into something like this is going to be a challenge. So, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I needed to think about my options, look over the insurance and things like that. And when I did make the announcement that I was going to rebuild, I mean, it meant so much to the community. And if she wasn't on board before that, then she certainly was at that point in offering to help. Um, but again, it's I didn't know what I was doing. And there's been so many times all along this that it showed. Some of the things that I thought might be, the last phases in a process like this were actually what I needed to do first. And,
do you have an
they,
example of that?
well, like, picking out all of the refrigeration equipment. You know, I figured they'd put the building up, and then that's when we need to figure all of that out. No, they want all of that picked out so that they can kind of build around it and put the electrical in that they need and all of the other things to get that planned. Again, I didn't know what I was doing, but there were lots of others to help me and help guide. Um, her firm KPE has worked very well with me, very closely with me. They sent out a request for qualifications to numerous construction companies. I'd already talked to someone, just like any tragedy, there were lots of construction companies and things like that showed up the day after the fire. Hey, we can help you. It's kind of like the ambulance chasers.
I was just
If
gonna
you,
say,
it's
yeah,
true though.
yeah.
And, I had many, many different people that were trying to talk to me and get in front of me in those first few days, that first week or something. And I did talk to a couple of them while I was trying to decide, and I did pick one of the companies that was there very early on, and it looked like they'd be a very good fit. And it's been a year and a half now. And that first half year, as you said, we couldn't do anything because we were waiting to clean up the debris, waiting on engineers to decide if the building next door was stable enough we could bring in the big equipment.
Mm.
But it's been another year since then, and there had just been arguments back and forth between the architect, the construction company, and I'd kind of lost my confidence in the construction company. So we got out of our contract recently with them and are talking to someone else. You know, I don't have enough money for my rebuild right now. That's one of the issues that we faced, and I'm hoping that I get treated very fairly by the construction company for asking out of the contract. We're still waiting to see on that, but it could have a big impact on what we're doing in the future. Um, Again, I've said this before, but I'm going full speed ahead. It doesn't look like it at times, but I'm doing everything that I can and waiting for more information from others. And right now, the construction company that we reached out to, they're putting a bid together so that we can talk to them. We have a few others, in our minds if we need to move on to someone else, but we're doing it and moving on.
So does that mean if you have sent out the RFQ already, does that mean you have like a layout and the equipment picked out and like you've done that part of the process, like of the redesign?
Right. Right. I'm staying with the architect. We've got the designs all prepared and, hoping that, my banker's trying to talk me into coming down a little bit in size, just because I am short on money. But I don't see that I can make it any smaller, make it work, and therefore make it work for the community for the next 20 or 30 years, because that's part of my plan. I'm going to be at retirement age when it gets rebuilt, but I'm still going to be there for a number of years. But my intention is that I'm rebuilding this so that my community will have a grocery store for the next 20 or 30 years. I want to make it strong enough. I want to make it valuable enough that someone else will want to buy it. And I've just gone through a mentoring program with Kansas State University and the Rural Grocery Initiative, about, getting that passed on and finding the buyer for that. So it's in my mind. I'm working on. I keep telling people I'm busting my butt to get back in business while I'm planning my exit strategy. Also, that's always in the future, but I've got to look at that also. But I'm gambling my whole future on this because selling this business is going to be my retirement plan. And again, I have to make it just as strong as possible and as valuable as possible to do that.
Yeah, that's the hard part about selling a grocery store is that a lot of them aren't really profitable. And like at that point, who wants to buy a business that like isn't making any money? And so to
Right.
rebuild while you're also trying to like hit some, profitability kind of picture so that it is in a strong enough position to be able to sell pretty soon. I mean, they say like you need at least 3 to 5 years to plan a business transition. And so the fact that you want out about 5 years after it opens, like that's, yeah, you're pretty much right on schedule. Not
Yeah.
thinking,
When I bought the building, I was talking with our local banker, and he's passed on, and his son is the president of the bank now. But I was talking with Alan Burdick, and he told me, he said, I would not loan anybody the money to buy that store except you. He said, the family name that you have here and what you've done for the community for over 100 years, the reputation that you built in Omaha as a meat cutter, he said, that's the things that are going to do it. Small town grocery stores are a dying breed, and it isn't going to be easy. But I have faith in you, and I think you can do it. And as I've said in the previous episodes, it was very hard at times, but
yeah,
we had really turned the corner. We had, made that name for ourselves. We were bringing people in from all over the area and way beyond at times for the specialty products that we made. And those are also the types of things that are going to, allow us to make this building and this business as strong as possible and get that reputation built for a new owner. I've said that I'm the only one that can put a grocery store in this town, for our future. Because as you said, these small town grocery stores are not super profitable. It made a nice living for me, did fine, and I expect that in the future. But if somebody else were to come in and try to start from scratch, by the time they put up a building, there wouldn't be enough profit in it to pay it off. But, with the insurance money that I have, which isn't enough, and with help that we're looking for in different areas, then I should be able to and make it valuable enough that someone else will want to take over that and see what we've got here. And with community realizing what they lost and how much it means to have a grocery store here now, that's gonna make a difference.
yeah,
I've got neighboring communities that lost their grocery store, uh, six of them over within 45 miles in the time that I was in business. And sometimes it's only after they lose that store that they realize we should have done more to support. You know, I'm working hard now to bring it back for my community, and I certainly do believe that we're going to have them more support than ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The little bit of downtime between having a close, convenient store like right down the street, that little bit of downtime can go a long way in people understanding the impact that, like, maybe the store is a little bit more expensive, like a few cents more expensive for the item than you're going to pay for like at the big box store down the street. But yeah, if you stop shopping there or if tragedy strikes and that store is no longer an option, think about like the time that it takes to drive and to park and to fight the crowd and to stand in line at the checkout and to spend your gas if it is further away. I mean,
Yeah,
those few pennies per item, I guarantee you're spending more to drive to the big box store than you are to just like use the local convenient option and like
right. I've
that.
done whole Facebook posts about that, that exact thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just described the scenario that I talked about exactly.
Yeah.
And people are realizing that. I mentioned all of these different communities. Um, Two of the communities have reached out to me in the past and said, "Would you please put a second grocery store in our town? Would you please come here after we lost ours?" And I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I was working too much already and focusing on one, and there's no sense of diluting my focus and losing both. So I've got to do what I care about, which is taking care of my community.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to add one piece here as far as like anybody who's never seen into the financials of a grocery business model and probably doesn't know. Grocery stores, especially an independent grocery store, from my experience, it takes roughly 95 to 99% of your revenue to run the business. So that's like what it costs to just stay in
Yeah,
business. And then you're thinking like, oh, so that means like the take home is like 1%. Yeah. Like the profit at the top that like you didn't have to spend that money to keep the lights on or to keep your employees' paychecks cashing at the bank or whatever. Like
yeah,
99% of the money that you take in goes right back out the door.
yeah.
And
I mean,
so
if people would look at the electrical costs that we've got with all of the compressors, the lights, the equipment, things like that,
what was
it
your
is,
electric bill back before, like rough ballpark? Probably fluctuated
yeah.
with the
We were like $1,800 a month or something like that.
yeah.
As you can see, my building was old. My building was inefficient. The equipment was old. But that's one of the things that I'm talking about in my future that are going to be so much better, and why I do think that I can make this business so much stronger. We fought with the power company. They proposed a rate increase and said it isn't going to bother anybody. I said this is going to be huge for us. We went before the Iowa Utilities Board, and I was one of 10 businesses that they used. I'll call it as a test case. I don't remember exactly what the right words were, but they looked at the possibilities of what this was going to do to us, and they came back and they said that this isn't going to bother anybody by more than 5%, on their monthly bill. My budget billing, my average bill before this increase had been about $1,300 with the highest at about $1,800. Now, all of a sudden, my budget billing, my average bill was over 1,800, and we had a bill that was 24 or 2,500 one time. Those air when you've got all of those compressors, they're also putting out heat. So now your air conditioning is working so much harder to keep it cold.
Right. Like
We had
really
to have
goes
two air
down
conditioners.
in the
Yeah,
winter.
5,000 square foot building, so we had to have two air conditioners. One of those broke down the week after I bought the store. The water heater broke down a month after I bought the store. You know, all of the upkeep and stuff that goes into a grocery store are the types of things that people don't think about. As you said, the average profit margin is 1 to 3% in a grocery store, and there are some that don't make that.
I
So
the first few years, I mean, when you're
Yes.
talking about that air conditioner broke down, the hot water heater broke down, that means that you're now in the red. Your 1
Yeah.
to 3%, that's gone to the air conditioner and then some. So
Yeah.
like the ends aren't meeting anymore as soon as you have like one unexpected expense. So yeah, the that razor thin margin. I'm sure people maybe have heard about that in the grocery industry. But that's what that means is that like out of every dollar, there's a penny left. So then when your
Yeah.
air conditioner breaks down, you need like a bunch of pennies, and that like where are you supposed to get those from? Yeah.
8 months after I bought the store, we replaced all of the lighting in the store, with more efficient lighting. There was a nice rebate on that, uh, but it still would have taken a few years to pay for itself. A year after I bought the store, we replaced most of the freezers and a couple of coolers in the store. Spent over $40,000 on that. So there goes the profit margin for a couple of years at least, that you've just killed off. But
Yeah.
that's what we had to do was do the things to try to make it more efficient, make it get better equipment, and do whatever I could.
Yeah.
And the people knew that we were here to stay and that we were trying to do everything that we could to provide for the long run. So that helps.
I feel like that's a good point about grocery in general is that you have to be in it for the long run. It's not the kind of business that you would ever open and be like, yeah, 3 to 5 years, I think I'll like be able to sell this or move on or whatever. It's like, no, like it's going to take 5 years just to make it like profitable, just to make it float. And then, then you really get to build it or whatever. So it is such a long run, committed, dedicated position to like
Yeah,
be a local grocer.
I was 48 when I bought the grocery store, and I had been in the business all of my life, but I'm still learning new things at that point
Yeah.
and taking on all of these new jobs and trying to do it efficiently. And, that takes time. I went to the food shows that my warehouse put on. I'm actually going to one next week. And I went to those, and I'm trying to buy for the future for the store for the next 6 months, get the deals where I can. Well, it takes time to learn how to do that and to do it properly, to do it efficiently.
Mhm.
I'm thinking to myself, well, ice cream, you know, I can get deals on that if I buy it here at the food show. I always sell ice cream. Well, it still gets outdated. You can buy too much.
Yeah.
And then other things, it's not worth when you're talking about a small town store like this. I can save some money if I order a couple of cases of green beans to come in 3 months. Well, am I really going to need those? And is it worth it tying up my money to save a quarter a case? Some of the things have huge savings if you buy them now. You know this.
Yeah.
Other ones are just very, very tiny,
Like, yeah,
little
save a
bits,
penny.
and
Yeah.
it's not worth it.
Sure.
I would get I would get stacks of paperwork that were like this, getting ready for the food shows. I wouldn't. I would put it on the scale to see what it weighed. I had 18 pounds of paperwork at times that were coming in, and I just start going through those books and tearing out the pages that I don't need a pallet of pork rinds. I don't need a pallet of this. My little store, this won't work. Saving the things that are going to work. But one of the other things that I did and ways that I tried to give back, we've got a food pantry down the block from us, just a block down the street. And because of my industry, I've always done what I could to help them. So I go down and I say, I see this on sale in a couple of months. Is that something you think you might want? Because I'm trying to give them the best deals that I possibly can and share items with them. I worked with a neighboring grocery store a couple of times. We'd buy a pallet of something together and split that up. They're one of the ones that I'm talking about that closed down and it's no longer there. But you try to work with your neighbors. You try to do the best that you can to make things more efficient and give you the best opportunities. And
Yeah.
that's one of the ways that I did that. I like I said, I believe in my community and I want to do what I can. So that's why I was working with the food pantry. It's necessary, and I've got the best option of helping them. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like from the first episode, he who can must. You have access to this, and that's what they
Exactly.
do, and like just put it together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, okay, so it sounds like on the architect front, you're have gone as far as you can, as far as designing the building, picking out the equipment, and now working to get the right contractor so we can actually
Yeah.
do construction. Um,
Yeah.
what have you been doing to occupy yourself and to, do what you can do kind of in the last year while it's been kind of a big hurry up and wait type situation? What else has come up and what else have you been doing?
I tell my story very well. I've had the opportunities. Yeah, I won that statewide business pitch contest years ago, and that introduced me to a lot of people around the state. Our governor, people at the Iowa Economic Development Authority, the small business development centers, things like that. A couple of years ago, I was invited into a program called Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. I looked at that. They said that you need to probably dedicate 25 or 30 hours a week to that. But it's tremendously helpful for your business. Well, at that time, I'm running the store. I'm working 80 hours a week or something, and I just didn't see how I could do that. So I had to back out of that. Well, I got a second invitation to that. I'm out of business at the moment. I had the time, so I dedicated myself to that, and it is something that is going to make my business more profitable, more efficient, and more valuable for the future. So I did that.
What would you
Um,
say were some of the best takeaways you got out of that program?
well, as I said, I work 80, 85 hours a week. I tried to do most of the things on my own. I knew that I was very poor at delegating jobs and things like that. And this teaches you how to do that better. This teaches you how to look at your financial reports better, but also how they tie together. How, if you can change a little bit here by being a little bit more efficient here, it makes this one so much better. And those are things that the people are looking for when they're talking about possibly buying your business. So
Right.
little changes here can make a big impact, down the road in some ways. Um, I've been limping for over 10 years because of I had a bad foot. I had some problems with that. My podiatrist kept saying, you need to get this taken care of, but you're going to have to be off of your feet for weeks. And I mean, with your foot propped up, not sitting at your desk or something like that. I had the time to do that. I was on a scooter or on crutches for 6, 8 weeks. I've got 21 pieces of titanium in my foot now, but it's a lot better than what it was, and it's going to allow me to work better in the future when I get back there.
Would
As I
you
said, I
would you have done that ever
no, I'd have continued
before?
limping along until after I retired, probably.
Oh, which is just like you were
Yes,
in
some days I didn't.
pain.
It didn't bother me, but there were other days where it hurt bad enough I could barely walk. But that's much better now. It's been about 8, 9 months. It's still recovering slightly, but I'm getting there. I talked about telling my story. We had the documentary that was done about me, which has brought me different opportunities. I spoke before I went to Ames, Iowa, which is about 3 hours away. In I think it was May or June, early June. But I spoke to the directors of all of the small business development centers here in the state and their advisory board also. I went to a festival called Entree Fest in Iowa City last month and was on a panel discussion there, talking to small business owners. I've had the opportunity to do different events and speak at different areas. Over the time that my store has been closed, I've been to Washington, D.C. twice and spoken to my senators, people in Congress, people on the small business and entrepreneurship committee for the Senate.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to do what I can to help my whole industry, help my community, help myself. get my story out there. Just this past weekend, we've talked about the documentary that was done about my store. They came from all over is the title of that. It has been accepted into a film festival on the other side of Iowa, the premier film festival for Iowa called the Snake Alley Festival of Films in Burlington, Iowa. Snake Alley is the most crooked street in the world, and that's what the film festival was named for. But I went there on Sunday. The film was shown, the awards ceremony. This is the T-shirt I got from that. The award ceremony was shortly after our film was shown. It was a 4-day event. I went for the final day in the award ceremony. The documentary that was done about me. Well, I didn't do the work. The documentary that was done about me won the award for the best Iowa-made film. But I'm there getting my story out. I talked to someone for 45 minutes or an hour almost during a break that we had, and got a number of connections that could very possibly help me in the future. I'm trying to do what I can, as I said, to share my story, to get that story out there, to find people that can help me. And 95 to 99% of these connections are not going to pan out. But that 1%, that 5%, that just those very few are what I need and what's going to do it. And just like the old fable, you've got to kiss a lot of toads or frogs, to get your prince. Well, I'm doing a lot of things along that line also, and hoping to find that one or those few that are going to make the difference for my store in the future.
Yeah. Would you say that's why you're like so focused on telling your story at this point, is trying to find the team who's gonna like actually
Yeah,
help you rebuild?
that's a lot of it. The film. I was blessed that Meta, that Facebook wanted to do this project and to put all of the money into it that they did. The basis of the story is about how important small businesses are to the community. But they
Can
used
we
my
start at the
story to tell them.
beginning of the can we start at the beginning of the
Yeah.
documentary story? Like, because I think you've told me a little bit, but I don't think we've talked about it like on the episode. So
Okay.
how did you first get approached, or whose idea was it? Like, how did the origin of the documentary come about?
Kira McCoy is a Meta Facebook employee. She is the one that started this Facebook group I've talked about in previous episodes. It's called the Leaders Network. It is a small business group of business owners and managers, but Facebook runs it. Facebook put it together. You have to be invited or vetted to be into the group. And it's amazing people from all over the country, people that are shipping products worldwide, people that are, doing national commercials, uh, people that have small town grocery stores. I'm the only grocery store owner in the group, but the people that I've met there have been amazing. Um, a year ago in May, Facebook invited 500 of us to Washington, D.C. to speak to our legislators, but they paid for the airfare, the hotels. They put together events for us and did that. And, they, us talking to the legislators about the things that are important for small businesses or why they do that. But we are the voices of small business. And, I had an amazing opportunity. Did that again this May, and there were fewer people this time. And, excuse me, it was April, but it was actually the day after the film premiered in Des Moines. But Kira had approached me last September or October as I'm recovering from my foot surgery, and said, "We'd like to talk to you. Do you have time for a Zoom meeting?" And did. And Susie Nelson was on the Zoom meeting also. She was one of the administrators of the group. But they said, "We have presented an idea to our bosses. We'd like to do a documentary about your story, about your attempt to rebuild and what you're doing in your community. And we can't go any further without talking to you and making sure you're on board with this."
Sure.
Yeah. Sure, sounds fantastic. And they had to keep pushing it further up the ladder. Uh, and it was probably 6, 8 weeks later, they came back and said, it's going to happen. Early December, we're going to come back and do this. Years ago, when I won that business pitch contest, a small documentary was done about me. And two guys came with a video camera, some recording equipment, and came to the store and were there for the afternoon. That was my experience with this type of thing. That was what I was kind of expecting, was something like that. The day that I graduated from that Goldman Sachs business program, I drove home from Des Moines. I got home after 5 o'clock that evening. And 20 minutes later, three people from the documentary are at my house. We've been making arrangements, but they wanted to come and meet me. And it was the cameraman, the producer, and the director for the documentary. And this is Friday evening. And we talked for 45 minutes, an hour, something like that. And filming is going to start next Tuesday. They were around town. They were staying in Omaha, which is about 35 minutes away. But they were around town all weekend and looking at areas where they wanted to film, talking to people, things like that. I expected three people. Tuesday morning, there was a 27-person film crew at my house. The street in front of my house was the whole block. Both sides of the street had cars and trucks. There were, you know, there was at least 3 or 4 generators in my front yard to power up all of the equipment they had. It's early December. They said, "Can we take your pickup out of the garage?" And I didn't know what they wanted, but sure, I'm trying to do anything that they want. And they set up tables so that they could feed the crew in there and get them out of the cold a little bit because half of these people were stuck outside. There was room in the house for everyone, or their jobs didn't require them. But that's when it started. And Tuesday, we filmed all day, different shots in my house. Then we went out to the cemetery and we're out there for an hour and a half or so. And, again, I'm trying to do anything that they want. I hadn't been walking very long after that surgery, and walking across the uneven ground out in the cemetery was very painful. They said, "Do you need to break? Do we need to come back and do this later?" I said, "No, whatever you need, we're going to get it done." I was hurting that night, spent a long time warming up and relaxing in the bathtub. But, they were here, finished filming on Saturday evening, and shots all around the town, talking to all sorts of people, and then took it back to California, and many people working on the editing. They sent a microphone to me that was almost 3 foot tall because they needed to re-record a little bit of audio. Somebody coughing in the background or something covering up some of the stuff they wanted. So I had a couple people come to my house while we did that. It was an amazing experience. They came to my house on Tuesday, was the first day of the filming. Wednesday, they were doing a lot of shots in a restaurant downtown that morning anyway, and I stayed away from that. I didn't need to get in the middle of it. Kira came to my house. She called me and said, "Can I come up and talk to you?" She was going back. She lives in San Francisco. She was going back that day, even though the project was continuing. But she wanted to talk to me and say goodbye and stuff. And at one point, she said, "Did you check out anything about the director? Have you heard anything about her?" I said, "Well, she's very young, but seems to know what she's doing." She said, "Did you know that she won an Oscar for her first documentary?" No.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. The people that they brought in were first class.
Yeah.
As I said, I expected three people and a camera, and it was 1,000 times more than that. It's already won awards in film festivals. As I said, there was an earlier one before that. It is one of three finalists for an international award in September in Los Angeles for Best Short Documentary. And just for the month of May, there were dozens that came in for that festival from around the world. And it won the best for May. And like I said, is now one of three finalists. Uh, I'd love to see this make it to the Oscars. You
Yeah.
know, who knows? I mean, but again, the whole thing is about getting that story out there. There's a website set up for it. They came from all over.com. You can find it on Facebook. You can find the videos on YouTube.
Mhm.
So again, I'm just trying to share the word about that and make the connections. Um, Kira has helped in any way that she can. We're working on a GoFundMe page, and we aren't going to release that until we've got some better news about when things are actually starting on the rebuild. You can go, the t-shirt that I wore in the last episode or two
Mhm.
is part of a fundraiser through Bonfire. It's bonfire.com/Mulholland. And, I wore the t-shirt to the film festival on Sunday. I was up on stage twice and talking about the film, talking about what we're doing, and had the opportunity to share my story with these people. It was after the first time, and then there was a break. That's why this woman sat down with me and shared all of these contacts, because people believe in what I'm doing and know that I'm trying to do it to help my community and want to do whatever they can to help me. And I appreciate that. And that's why I'm out there talking to people. That's why I'm going to these different events around the state, around the Midwest, and trying to get the short story shared and asking other people to do that for me also. Tell your friends, show them this. Once you watch that film, you can't help but be moved by the story. And that's what's going to help us in the long run.
Yes.
And I'd love to find some ways to get my story shared, in even bigger ways. I think one of the best opportunities might be to get on a talk show or something, and trying to find that opportunity. I
Amazing.
need to find that assistant to the director or producer or whatever. Somebody's cousin does this, and you know it'll happen.
It will happen.
That's exactly why I'm going full speed ahead, even though I don't have the money yet. I believe in it, and I'm going to do whatever I can for my community, and getting that story out there and getting that money to come in is how I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm all in.
I mean, it's several $1 million, most likely, to build the building and all the equipment and I
Yeah,
mean, total that it would
right.
cost to put it
Yeah,
up.
yeah. In insurance, as I said, I had replacement cost coverage. I thought I was fine. That doesn't mean anything. They put a cap on that. Insurance is going to pay not quite 1.2 million. There was some other money that came in for the contents of the building, but again, not enough. Think about what the shelving cost for the entire store.
Yeah.
Think about what a big electrical meat saw or grinder cost.
Yeah.
The replacement on all of the freezers and refrigeration needs came up to about $400,000. Insurance paid me $200,000 for the contents of the building. So again, I'm behind the eight ball there and trying to do what I can. We've gotten a grant here from the state. We've gotten promises of a little more money here and there. But part of the stuff, they can't tell us what they're going to be able to do until we can give them our final numbers. And so we've got to, continue forward and hope for the best. And I'm doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a testament to what resilience really looks like, where and like what persistence, perseverance, like what it really looks like. It looks like there's no green lights going on, like on your road, and you're zooming ahead anyway, because
Yeah.
the world isn't necessarily going to just like drop it in our lap usually. Like
Yeah.
faith, that belief in yourself, that drive to like keep pushing because it matters.
Yeah,
That's the part that like magnetizes, in my opinion, magnetizes all of these opportunities to you.
right. You know, when we had the premiere for the film, it premiered in Des Moines, and the Iowa Arts Council was extremely helpful in getting this out there and choosing where to have that. They were talking at one point that the premiere may be in New York City, someplace on the East Coast. So that's what I was thinking. But you never know when people that you've met in the past are going to pop up and be extremely impactful. I'd forgotten about it. I had seen something years ago about the director of the Iowa Arts Council. She was one of my customers when I worked that 20 years in Omaha. But I never expected, I'm a small town grocer. Why would I ever be working with the Iowa Arts Council? So I'd forgotten about that. She didn't, she had seen pictures, of the previews for the film and stuff, but it had been enough years. She didn't recognize me, but her mother-in-law was one of my favorite customers, was a caterer that I did a lot of extra work for in all of those years that I worked up there. She didn't come to me because of that former connection, but she felt a lot better about it once she realized and once I told her who I was and reminded her of that. It's who you are and how people connect to you are some of the ways that are going to help you in the long run. I've talked about the things that I did with COVID, with the severe flooding that we had in our area, and it was part of it was the reputation that I built for helping the people in my area at that time that came back to me when I needed help now, after my store burned. I commented that people had come to me with donations to help the flood victims, to help people that were suffering because of COVID, lost their jobs or whatever. And now they were coming to hand me donations to help me.
Yeah. Like tragedy obviously is heartbreaking and nobody would ever willingly walk right into the middle of it. But I do think that those kinds of moments show us the true nature of humanity. I think at our core, humans are very generous and very loving and know a good heart when we see it. So, like the fact that they would trust you, the first couple of times to like take those resources and deploy them to other people. I mean, they clearly understood your track record to like come and chip in on you yourself getting back on your feet. So,
People, I keep saying that I'm nothing special. I'm just trying to do my job. I'm trying to do what's right. But the humility, the humbleness are what people comment about and say that's the reason that we want to help you. I had immediately after the fire and people are sending me donations, handing me money or whatever, I had an extremely hard time accepting that. You know, I don't want money for myself. I want money so I can help other people. And I had a very good friend that talked to me at one point and she said, you need to stop thinking like this. You need to think of it as um, a down payment, as a payment, a donation to helping the community's future. You know, because bringing that store back is so extremely important. That's what the money is for. It's to help the community. Through you.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it made it a lot easier to accept and to understand then. But it was very hard, and I it really bothered me that people were sending money at first, and now I'm out asking for it,
Yeah.
and trying. My community has given so much already. It's a very small community, and they have donated in so many ways. Whether it's money, whether it's time, whatever. There's been people that have helped me all along. but it's more than they can do. And that's why that's why this documentary is so important. That's why I'm trying to get the story out there and get it shared, uh, because the people here have done what they can, but it's beyond that now, and I'm hoping that others would hopefully help an entire community. There's over 1,000 people here that now no longer have the access to fresh foods. So that's why we're doing this and why I'm trying so hard.
Well, and I think too, like, you are charging full steam ahead and you are doing everything that you can. And that also, as far as making an impact, I feel like that's a critical ingredient where a lot of people want to like get their ducks in a row kind of thing, and then I'll move forward. And it's like, you'll be sitting there waiting to gather ducks for the rest of time. Whereas,
Yeah,
like, if you truly want it to happen, if it's lighting a fire under you such that you have to run forward, that's where I think the world just kind of starts falling into step with what you're doing. Like people show up wanting to make a documentary about your story and like all of the
yeah.
things that you truly need to make it happen.
Just like anything else, you can't please everybody. It has been extremely frustrating for myself with the amount of time that it's taken, but it's been extremely frustrating for the community also. And there have been a few people that have been very vocal. Why hasn't anything happened? Why are we not seeing anything? I'm trying. Those comments hurt. I was getting extremely depressed. I was not being out in public in my community for a while because it bothered me. Everybody asking, and I don't have any good answers. I'm
Yeah.
trying, I'm trying to do what I can. There were people that said that too he's out begging for money, trying to, have people line his pockets. And that's not what this is about. And I'm not waiting while we're looking for the money. They said he's not going to do this until he has enough donations. That's not true. I am doing everything that I can, even knowing I don't have enough money yet. Um, my banker is talking to me about possibly going slightly smaller on the building, uh, because we don't have the funds for what I'm looking at yet. I don't think that that's going to be enough for what the community needs, how to build the store, uh, actually. And, I'm fighting against that because, again, it needs to be there for the future, and having that smaller footprint, that is just a convenience store. We've got that at this point, and we need a grocery store with the fresh foods, with the fresh meat, the fresh produce and vegetables. So it needs to be a little bit bigger. It needs to be, the same size as what I had before or bigger. There were two empty lots next door to me that I purchased so that we could expand a little bit. That's how we're able to put the drive up window in that we've got planned, the coffee shop that we've got planned. These are things that, my community needs. We don't have a coffee shop like that, at this point, and it's something that could bring more. My customers that come for the groceries are going to help out the coffee shop. People that come for the coffee shop are going to be picking up groceries also. So it's a win-win, and going to help each other. But as I've said before, my business also helps those other businesses on Main Street. People that come here now, they're going to go to the drugstore as long as I'm in town. Different things like that.
Yeah.
And so, it's just building blocks and dominoes that are all connected and that help each other, and you know,
It
got to
takes
make it work.
it takes a lot to build a grocery store, even if you already have the building, let alone if you're starting literally from the ground up. And
Yeah,
I totally hear you on kind of those, accusatory is probably like too strong of a word, but like those comments that are like, why haven't we seen anything? What's happening? Like, why isn't he doing anything? That is like my main goal with this podcast is to kind of put everybody's power back in their own hands. And instead of saying, like, why hasn't he done anything yet? Ask a question: how could I help? What could I do to help this move along faster? I want it faster than this. So how do I get involved to like make it happen on a faster timeline? I'm not going to just sit in the cheap seats and be like, this guy down here needs to hurry up and get to work and do better and all of that. It's like we all have something to add and we all have the capacity to make it happen faster. So, there's something that we could do potentially, even if that's just okay, then help us spread the word even faster so that we can raise the
Yeah.
funds faster, so that we can move ahead more quickly. I mean, it doesn't sound like what you're waiting on is necessarily much in the way of like the technical process, so much as it does take a bunch of money to make it happen. And I understand not wanting to wait until you have all the money raised. Like you could definitely start construction without the full
Yeah.
funds. But at the same time, like you better have some good momentum. Otherwise, you're going to stop construction right in the middle when the funds do run out. And
Yeah.
then there's a big pause where your building's half built. And that's not what anybody wants. So,
No,
yeah, we have to
no.
at least see the finish line of the fundraising, to be able
Yeah.
to kind of like move with a good conscience into that construction phase. So, yeah,
Yeah.
like instead of why aren't you doing better? What could I be doing? How could I help? What could I contribute? Who could I call? What resources are hanging you up right now?
Yeah.
What?
I mean, not, again, people are coming to me with ideas and with offers of help
Mhm.
in different ways. I had a friend that offered me he had bought a house that had a barn behind. He said you could use that barn to put your smoker in or to make your sausages and still be, making some money. I said, I appreciate that, but that won't work. I said, besides having the smoker, I need refrigeration and freezers. And it needs to be, someplace that's clean enough that could be inspected and pass inspection.
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. But again,
Good thought.
people are wanting to throw ideas out and
Mhm.
just like the
Most
other stuff,
people.
95, 99% of them may not work, but, you know, throw them out here. It's that 5%, that 1%, whatever it is, that is going to make a difference and that is going to help. Right now, the main thing that I can think of is spreading the story. That's the thing that can help me the most.
Yeah,
Finding a way to share that story even bigger. So, that's
absolutely.
what I'm focusing on at this point. When we're not meeting and working on the next phase of the build. Um, COVID and the construction industry right now has caused problems. Part of it's people wanting to work or not having enough people to do the work. We when we were looking, we needed to do masonry work on the wall next door still, and my construction company sent out a request for bids to 14 or 15 different masonry companies last year. One responded, and my architect thought that they were possibly bidding a much higher than what it should be, just because they did have it locked up very possibly. I was talking to somebody just last week that I think could do the job and do it much cheaper. So we're going to look forward on that. But again, it's just finding ways to save the money where we can, make the most of it, and get more in by spreading the story.
Yeah. That's really all you can do at this point. And that is why down in the description, we have all the links that you need to personally help share the story. So I expect that there's going to be at least a few people who feel called to help get the word out there. Either they have a personal connection to rural grocery or a personal connection to wanting to use whatever voice you have, whatever platform you have to wanting to help this community, these 1,000 people who don't currently have access. They have a person, a champion who's trying to bring back access, but there's only so much one person can do without the support of the funding and the connections and all of that. So any amount of helping to raise visibility of this story that you can personally do, we greatly appreciate it. your impact helping someone else to make an impact that genuinely improves the quality of life of many, many people in the process. So any amount that you're able to share, we do greatly appreciate that. We'll call that a wrap here on the third episode of My Grocery Adventure. Tom, thank you so much for joining us
You,
again and sharing your story. I hope it's a win-win. I know I certainly have had a lot to think about from what you shared, and I'm sure others will too. And if we can pay you back by helping to raise visibility on your story, then I feel like that's a pretty fair trade. So thank you
thank you.
so much. And we will see you guys next time on the next installment of My Grocery Adventure. Until then, you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I. Thank you again for taking the time to witness Tom's story, the very challenging things that life put on his path, and what I personally think of as the inspiring ways that he handled a lot of it. And I know I personally have learned a lot from Tom. I hope you did too. I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Again, thank you so much for any support that you put on the podcast, liking the episode, subscribing on the YouTube channel or whatever platform you're on. But also showing some support to Tom's story and the Malvern community in general, as they have been and are still currently, at the time of recording this in October of 2023, they are still without groceries in their community. And that's something that has always, may always pull at my heartstrings, is when there isn't access to healthy food nearby. That automatically puts the citizens of that community at a disadvantage that I think is unfair. And if there is even just a little boost, like liking the video or anything that you can do to help their community regain that access, that critical infrastructure of having a grocery store in their town, it's a beautiful way to pay it forward as much as you can. And remember, there is no impact too small. So until next time, I do hope you'll be joining us again at some point. Until then, take such good care of yourselves, and so will I.